All right, everybody. Now, this is gonna be a little disjointed feeling, but like, yeah, we're picking up basically immediately where we left off yesterday, and we got 2 fucking hours, if not that. If we're at what? We're not even at 1 full hour, so we have 2 hours 21 minutes. We're listening at 1.5 times speed, so hopefully it's, better. We shall see. I don't know. Alrighty, let's go.
Don't know yet. Our next Backrooms video was uploaded nearly 2 years later. Damage Control was uploaded in January of 2023, and the next episode, Found Footage number 3, was uploaded September of 2024. This is for a couple reasons. After Damage Control, Kane began working more on the Backrooms film, and also between Damage Control and Found Footage 3, the entirety of his new series, The Oldest View, took place, which I have an entire video dedicated to The Oldest View if you want to check that out. If Kane makes something, I'm probably going to talk about it at some point. But we were not left waiting without reward, because Found Footage 3 is by far the longest Backrooms episode, clocking in at over 45 minutes. And in my opinion, it very well might be the scariest of the whole series. Found Footage 3 opens with someone's various home videos. Early in the video, we hear them turn on a radio, and the radio broadcaster is discussing the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing. The Oklahoma City bombing occurred on April 19th of 1995, meaning we can assume that the events of Found Footage 3 take place in late April of 95. This puts it far ahead of the async timeline we've seen thus far in 1990, and makes it much closer to the events of Found Footage 2, meaning again that everything we're about to witness is in a post-async complex. In the beginning, we see our...
Well, I don't know about it being post-async. That remains to be seen. But we definitely know there is a post-disaster of some kind. We don't know exactly what that looks like, what it involves. So much we have yet to really know. But, no. There's some funky shit that's going to happen. And I can't wait to see it. I wonder if we'll see it in the movie or not.
Our protagonist for Found Footage 3, a guy talking to the camera named Ravi. Ravi seems to be a journalist as he is talking about negative comments he heard made by an executive. So it makes sense as to why this independent journalist walks around recording things. We then hear a phone call he makes while in his apartment, as it seems he heard someone downstairs. He calls the landlord to confirm that no one's coming by to perform maintenance, so after hearing a suspicious noise, he goes downstairs to investigate. He finds that his glass door has been shattered. He believes that someone has broken in. Now, an important thing to note here is that the broken glass is on the outside, not the inside. Meaning, while it's reasonable Ravi would think someone broke into his house, it seems that instead, something is broken out. Ravi makes his way over to his closet, moving around a drum set he has set up in the middle of the room, and peeks into the closet. As he does, there's a weird distortion heard.
Someone there?
Yeah, Ravi's basement was the freakiest location.
But this may just be digital, as Ravi doesn't
not
notice.
inside the back.
He continues to search until he comes to the basement and finds a massive hole in the wall has been made. It seems that something has broken through the brick. Not only that, it reveals a path forward. Ravi is obviously alarmed by this, but finding this secret hallway beneath his home, he begins to investigate. As he steps in, this happens.
And yeah, he had his feet knocked out from under him, basically.
It seems he was dropped through a tunnel that led to a cabinet. Falling out of the cabinet, he now finds himself in what seems to be a classroom or something similar. He tries to make his way back up the chute he fell through, but...
What an awful feeling.
And the only way out is through. Obviously, Ravi is freaked out. He thinks there is an entire secret facility right beneath his home. He'll soon come to realize that the structure is much larger than any man or crew could secretly make. Once again, it's important to note what the structure here looks like. A lot of us can see a brief flash of this place and think it familiar to classrooms or office spaces that we've been in before, but there's just enough about them that doesn't fit right. Aside from any attention to detail on the walls, other than things like a sign that points to stairs or a speaker, things aren't where they're supposed to be. A stool sits on a low desk. A chair has a back that is way taller than any of the other variations. Again, these are all pieces of things we're familiar with, but not fit together correctly. He comes to one room that has a long conference table that cuts off a door, which on the other side of the window is simply a brick wall. Again, all the pieces are there, but they're fit in ways we would never put them together. Ravi continues
this part
until he gets to a door where he can hear strange music coming from the other side.
No, that's not what happened. I once again gotta correct something. What happened there was even freakier than you think. Let's see. Nope. Too far. Okay, so he goes into this pseudo conference area, carries on, notices the light switches and flips those on. Okay, so he initially, triggers the light switch. Now that's important. Ravi triggers the light switch. So he tries all these doors. They're not openable. They probably don't even go anywhere, realistically speaking. And so he goes into this sort of cubby area, with that hallway being accessible, right? So he opens this, goes down this hallway. This is something I've seen a lot of people miss. It's just a demonstration of freakiness more so than anything else.
How is this even here?
Yeah, more incredulity, you know. Hey, Red Scope, welcome. So he leaves that door open, okay? Turns around, door wide open. Remember that. Wanders to the end of the corridor. Notices the weird chairs and the stuff's kind of out of place. Like, this chair's in the middle of the hallway. Like, someone, you know, all the chairs that we've seen so far have been lining the hallway. This one's right out in the middle. It's almost like somebody put it there. But whether or not that happened, we don't know. Not important. What's about to happen is what's important. So he goes into this conference room. One last look down this corridor. Lights are on, the door is wide open. Is this IRL or CGI? This is CGI. This is KanePixel's Backrooms. Found footage 3, specifically. But anyway, so he goes, he's like, what the? Oh, there's a brick wall just beyond that door. That's really weird. Of course, this is because the complex doesn't make stuff in a very sensible, you know, manner. It's just slapping stuff together. I really love that about the complex. Anyway, so he's like, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
I just love that. I love how deadpan that is. Anyway, he sees this stairwell, even though it's not really a stairwell. It's got a hole in the wall, and it's a crawl space. And so he's like, well, I'm not crawling into that. I'm not going that way. So he thinks he's going to get a regular exit. No, he's only going to get to go farther in. He's like, oh, I see that tiny little hole in the wall. I'm not crawling into that. Fuck that. So he has no choice but to double back. Now, this room's not very big. This door doesn't go anywhere. Back behind him toward where he was looking is obviously kind of a no-go, but it's really not a no-go. It's very much where he'll have to go. But then he rounds back the corridor he just walked down. Why are the lights off? Who flipped the switch that Ravi himself just turned on? What the fuck? And Ravi knows he was just here 5 minutes ago. He didn't flick that light switch off. So now he's, I'm sure the hair on the back of his neck's standing on end, but you know what can you do? Pitch black, door closed. What the fucking fuck?
Fucking hell.
This shouldn't be happening. Something or someone, whether it be the complex itself or the still life or some other being, something came behind him without actually making contact with him and turned off that light and shut that door. This door was wide open. Now it is not. And then the lights are about to flick on by themselves here in a moment. He'll jiggle with the door and be like, what? I'm locked in. Because I guess this was a one-way door or whatever. Also, even though Wendigoon here says...
Ravi continues until he gets to a door where he can hear strange music coming from the other side.
That strange music is mood music. It's not actually playing in situation. It's just for the audience. What the fuck? Like, this was an area he was just in, and now it's locked. He can't go back.
Serious.
So he has no choice but to turn around and go back to the crawl space and maybe get through there. Fumbles around in the dark. The light switch is... I think he was messing with light switch just then. That didn't work. Maybe the wiring is bad, but maybe not, because... Damn. lights all flick back on, and then they flicker a little more, and then Robbie is reasonably freaked the hell out. And well, what can you do? And so that is, like, that's a situation a lot of people have seemingly gotten incorrect.
Your side.
I don't know why. Even Wendigoon here got that wrong.
Eventually, Robbie finds a small passageway to crawl through. This takes him to a room with a microwave and a sunken wall, a couch, and behind the couch, in a place where perhaps a picture frame would normally hang, it passes on into another room. This room again leads to something that feels human but different. A single lamp is on.
Yeah.
Kitchen table sits at the back with the clock next to it. The clock fixed on the time of 7:16. He continues to a bright room that has 6 chairs facing each other.
I want to say that 7:16 time stamp is important for something, but it's probably only symbolically important and not like an actual plot point. So I don't know. Whatever. Watching this at 2:20 a.m. is kind of scary. One jump scare and I'm gone. Oh, dude.
And he looks up to see a false sky.
Oh, you poor bastard.
It's the visage of a room with a skylight, but the sky's manufactured. The brightness to the room applied as if the sun were there, but all that's above him is a still image. The geometry continues to not make sense. He gets up to a ledge and sees 2 recliners facing a wall, and eventually finds a passageway behind a large dresser. Moving forward, he comes to a room that seems reminiscent of perhaps a house or a school. On the ground is a large playmat. The playmat being a carpet that shows simple streets. If you grew up like me and you were into things like Thomas the Train and Matchbox cars, then a carpet like this is probably familiar, as a lot of little boys had them. It was a mobile playmat that you could drive your cars on and race on the streets against each other. But then here, it's just copied one for one in the complex. Other than that, the room has no details other than the red and beige walls. Weirdly enough, it's almost like how a kid would remember a school or a friend's house. When the kid came over, he didn't care about the windows or the pictures on the walls. All he remembered was
you used to play on that so much. I know everybody did. What's really freaky, and again, this is something nobody points out. Parts of this, like, he even goes as far as to say, yeah, red and beige walls. Do you not see this wall directly in front of you? This wall is unfinished. That's completely new. Most of the complex either has this modern architecture or the old style office space, you know, the yellow wallpaper rooms. And then it'll have some urban spaces. But an unfinished spot of drywall that didn't have any color on it, doesn't have wallpaper, doesn't have anything on it. Isn't that a little strange?
Playmat that he would play with his cars on. Similar to the painting on the wall in found footage 2, it's certain pieces of humanity, but it only grabs a few specific pieces for some reason. There's a cut and we find Ravi in another room full of sofas, to which Ravi says,
"This is a furniture store now?"
Furniture store now?
Yep.
Keep that in mind for later. Robbie pushes into another room where the walls are much darker. There's odd details like a traffic cone in the corner, and then in front of a door, a large pile of chairs. It seems that someone barricaded themselves here for some reason. As he keeps moving, strange music begins to play again.
Now this music actually seems to be playing in this situation. Like, it's actually filtering through the speakers in the room next door.
He keeps moving and then finds himself in a room that is very interesting. This room has very harsh corners and hallways, but compared to the rooms we've seen previous, the detail here is far more abstract. For one, we see a speaker on the wall that seems to be where the music is emanating from, but around this, the room seems further to deteriorate.
Isn't the actual backroom pictures a furniture store? Yes, they were renovating it to turn it into Hobbytown, USA, back in 2002. Oh man, I can't believe that was 24 years ago. Ugh.
Beneath the speaker, we can see a black growth on the wall. Perhaps this is more of the mold or bacteria mentioned earlier. The carpet and wallpaper is chipping in several places. On the ground, there is an array of books and pieces of paper that seem arranged around a specific point. This is kind of reminiscent of like in found footage 2, where that girl was doing experiments with a null zone in a room and began dropping things through to see what would happen. Here, this almost seems like the setup around a null zone, but it's in the complex, so maybe it was someone who thought this would be a gateway back out. We can see that the room around this has been ransacked. Drawers and cabinets pulled open. This would also explain why the chairs existed against the door in the room before this, as whoever was here didn't want anything getting in. But then that...
Now, this is really, like... I wish we could see more of whatever this is in the corner. It's implied to be a dead body. But, like, I don't know. I want to know more. I want to see
question,
more.
Then why did they not cover up the door right next to where Ravi was? I mean, Ravi just stepped through that door. If they're going to blockade one, you'd think they'd blockade the other. As Ravi looks around, something scares him.
And it's also important to note that Ravi smelled something terrible when he walked into this room. He said, "It smells like shit in here." Well, it's probably because this is a dead body in the corner and it's been rotting there a while.
Oh my god.
You're going to sleep. Take care, Red Scope. Enjoy your sleep. And then, of course, the still life. I want to say the still life is back in here somewhere, but don't know. And this is also really funny. This is such a narrow little corridor. I wonder if it was like jammed back in there.
Now, we don't get a great look at what Ravi saw in the corner that made him exclaim. The corner's too dark to make anything out, but I think this is probably a dead body. Similar to how in found footage 2, that girl found where the body of the car crash victim crawled into the room and then died, and then that growth was all over it. I think here the darkness we see in the room is because there's a body in here. Someone probably fell into the back rooms and then survived for some time, putting chairs against the door and then arranging the books in the room for some reason, perhaps to try to find their way back out, or they either starved or were injured and died in that corner. And similar to the last place we found a body, something else is in here with him. As Ravi begins to run away, he remarks that he's leaving, and as he looks back, whatever was in there turns off the lights. Ravi continues to make a run for it, running to the makeshift furniture store and shutting the door behind him. As he begins to leave, this happens.
Oh man, that knock on the door was so creepy.
Hello?
You shouldn't have tried to say anything, man. You should have just hid.
This is such great horror, and I never want my analysis or trying to pick apart everything we see in the videos to detract from the fact that this is such a great series. There are so many things we can ask ourselves in that little interaction.
Should have kept his mouth
We've seen
shut.
the life forms up until this point. They're these monstrous, stilted creatures with some vague human mindfulness, but a bad mimicry. And if this is just another one of those, then why, when it came to a shut door, did it knock? Only to then seemingly revert back to its settings of breaking down the door and chasing Ravi. There's something so menacing about this attempt to be human before it sheds the facade. It's little moments like this that add to the tension and mystery in a horrifying way and leaves us asking terrifying questions. Ravi, being chased, keeps running into new areas. He runs into one place that has the carpet and ceiling of some kind of office, empty water jugs everywhere throughout, before he gets to a walkway.
Now that's actually an important detail that a lot of people, again, don't point out. This is proof that you will die of starvation. You won't die of dehydration, you'll die of starvation. Because water is locatable. This is a lot of water. Ravi finds, like... Let's go to actual Backrooms found footage 3 for a sec. When he's being chased, he ends up... So 2, 4, 5... 6, 7, 8, 9... Like 10? 10 separate empty... bottles of water, big jugs. Like there's another one right there. That's a 10th one. This part is so freaky too, the Red City. But yeah, like there's nothing to eat here. I really feel bad for anybody, and I mean anybody who is unfortunate enough to end up here.
In one place that has the carpet.
Starving to death is not a good way to go. Just so you're aware.
And ceiling of some kind of office. Empty.
Oh, and also
being chased. It's like this that add.
Whoops.
New areas. He runs in one place that has the...
People have analyzed this sign here. It's, I believe Ravi comes up to it, shuts this door. The still life is just beating down that other door. He turns around, and this is like, the sign on the wall here is like backward Hebrew or something. Truly crazy
ceiling
stuff.
Of some kind of office, empty water jugs everywhere throughout, before he gets to a walkway and finds himself in a massive city. No matter how much you know about the complex, it will always surprise you. This makes it appear that he's on a high floor of a skyscraper, bridge connecting the two buildings together. Or what we see in the windows, actual floors that can be accessed, or are these just images of floors pasted over the blank windows, like the ceiling to the sky we saw earlier? It's bathed in the same red light we saw in the street in Pitfalls. There's a night sky filled with stars above him, surely another mockery. The complex could theoretically be endless and have spaces as small and large as you could imagine. Of course, Ravi's still being chased and has no time to consider this as he pushes forward. He finds himself at first in another succinct room, balcony with no access above him, and a ledge he climbs over. When he gets to the other side, he sees this, something that looks like the summarization of perhaps a school or a house in a neighborhood. The tile around looks like a walkway, and there are indicators that this is certainly mimicking an outdoor area. The green carpet alludes to grass, the street lamp, the slide, but the building itself is bare, just windows and a shell. It's like a house or a school, but a child's playset of a house or a school, all a facade to mimic the real thing. As Ravi is still being followed, he stands on the other side of this quote-unquote building, and suddenly the lights turn on.
Yeah, the still life flicks the switch.
Nowhere left to hide in the darkness, Ravi continues to run, making his way up a staircase and finding a structure more similar to the rest of the complex, fluorescent lights and yellow wallpaper. There's a black stain on the floor and some growth on the walls. Again, it seems in the years after Async's influence, the complex has continued to deteriorate. Ravi continues until he gets to a room that has the layout of an apartment. Power outlets on the wall, spaces for windows, a radiator, a kitchen, but of course the structure is wrong. Where the windows are supposed to be, there's instead just a brick wall. Where the ceiling should be, there's nothing. The brick wall just continues to a large light. Ravi climbs up on a ladder to see this, what appears to be a Tibetan Buddha statue facing away from him. Its placement here is...
That's the, it isn't just a Buddhist statue, it's a statue of a specific Buddhist goddess, a goddess of luck, which is like super important and symbolic. The goddess of luck has her back turned to you. So that's not good.
Obviously odd and haunting. But for some reason, its inclusion as facing away from...
Damn it, like the only time I get onto a stream, it's about spoilers for the Backrooms movie. You couldn't be more wrong, however you say your name. No, this is a summary for the Backrooms series to prepare you for the movie. Nobody's seen the movie yet. Like, relax. Eat the plants. Bear Grylls your way out of the Backroom. I hate to tell you this, but you can't eat plants. You can chew them up and swallow them, but you cannot digest cellulose, and thus you cannot derive nutrition from it. But here's the problem. You can't eat those plants, because I guarantee you those plants are green in an area where there's no sunlight. Why are they green in an area with no sunlight? Well, that's because they're not real. They're not real plants. I guarantee you those are silk or plastic or something. I guarantee you that's fake stuff. Not. And the black moss, oh God, no, do not eat any of that. It's mold, not moss, first of all. No, you can't eat that shit.
From Ravi away from us is even more menacing. Keep its presence in mind for now. Camera cuts and Ravi continues through more tight corridors, eventually finding himself in what appears to be reminiscent of a dance studio, categorized by the large white room with the mirrored wall. And speakers adorned in this studio play an odd track. Ravi looks at a poster on the wall and sees this. This is a real poster of a USC Arcadia hospital flyer printed in Chinese.
2022. Imagine living in 1995 and seeing a poster for something that happens in 2022.
This is an actual flyer printed by the hospital in Arcadia, California for free health screenings. Only the version we see printed on the wall is the version for individuals who speak Chinese. Alarmingly, this flyer is from 2022, and we know that our cameraman at least went in 1995. So why on earth is it here? Well, it seems that the Backrooms is no respecter of times, right? So this whole place is just a jumbling of different areas.
You probably shouldn't spoil yourself for the series. You are, again, completely wrong. You will be lost if you don't know what's happening. I mean, you'll probably be good enough to watch the movie and take the movie at face value, but if you don't realize yet, there's going to be stuff in the movie that ties into the series. There are going to be things that will pass you by if you don't understand. Like, it's up to you, but I'm just telling you, you know, you definitely want a primer.
In different series of time in one place. But even then, that doesn't make sense, because if that were the case, then the majority of the complex would be caves and huts and small villages. You know, things that didn't just exist in the last 40 years. So what is this poster from 2022 doing in 1995? And this is also the second reference to Oriental imagery that we've seen, combined with the Buddha statue from earlier.
Oh, yeah.
It won't be the last. Ravi sees a sign on the wall that reads exit and follows towards it. This brings him to a large room with a sort of tower that goes up and up. Around the tower seems to be several instruments. Old mixers, electronic keyboards, a microphone stand, and on the wall across from him, a painting of a smiling sun. He looks down the chasm beneath him and sees the same painting. He then looks up at the tower itself and sees the painting repeated over and over and over as this tower climbs. This sun, or this style of sun, is often referred to as splendor. With Kane, this splendor thing is a huge rabbit hole in itself, and the sun has appeared in a lot of symbolism up until this point, and specifically the image of splendor will continue to appear as we move forward. It is a can of worms that I do not want to open right now, so we'll do that later. Ravi finds what seems to be a radio system and thinks he can use it to call for help. After recording a distress signal, it seems that the signal begins to transmit. So as it does, Ravi continues to look for a way out. He continues back through the dance hall from before, coming now to a room.
And also, there's another key point that Wendy has missed out on. When Ravi does this...
Yes.
Okay, so Ravi gets a radio signal sent out. Oh yeah, I've got my SOS. No. Okay, it's got to be earlier than
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Do you copy? Testing.
So,
1, 2, 3.
He's sending out his radio broadcast.
Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
And if you look carefully, you'll see it here in a moment. Bingo. The green light phenomenon. He inadvertently, because we think the green light either has something to do with breaking through a null zone or creating a null zone, or it is producing new sections of Backrooms. It's kind of one or the other, but it's hard to say right now which. There's a lot of uncertainty as to what this green light exactly means. Uh-oh. Why did I lose? There we go. Sorry, lost connection for a sec there. Anyway, and so this green light is like really important for whatever the hell the series is trying to do. So I just thought that pointing that out would be important.
With green carpet,
bear that
where
in
he
mind.
Comes across a drum set, as well as things like a plant and an RC car.
And that's the same drum set that was in Robbie's basement.
This room branching off to several others. Now, if you'll remember, back in Robbie's apartment,
Yeah.
we saw that he had a drum set. What are the chances of someone who has drums coming across drums in the back rooms? I mean, if they're just random printings and mismatchings of a ton of stuff from human culture, what's the chance a drum player finds drums? Robbie opens a door and finds himself somehow looped back to the makeshift playground from earlier. At the same time, Robbie starts to hear what sounds like someone transmitting through the radio, and he begins to run back. But as he does,
It's a radio, the radio broadcast that Robbie was picking up here, or no, not here. It's later on here. Like right here, he opens the door and he's back at the playground. Okay, so the radio chatter you're hearing are police codes. There's a small theory going around that Robbie somehow tapped into a police scanner by broadcasting what he tried to broadcast via the radio tower, and that's all playing over the speakers in the the playground room as well as right here. So yeah, we get our first sort of kind of look at the still life. It's not super great, but yeah, it's the still life, all right. Poor Robbie freaks the fuck out.
This creature is unlike any we've seen before. Seemingly, this was the thing that was following Robbie all the way back in the room where I thought there was a dead body. This thing looks different. It is not the same jilted form of the life form. This back in the room.
Actually, I gotta wonder. Maybe this is the still life sitting here or laying here or whatever. And well, no, he does hear a bump, but it's off in the distance. Maybe I'm wrong.
I thought there was a dead body. This thing looks different. It is not the same jilted form of the life form. This seems far more human. It has the proportions closer, but if we slow it down as it moves, it still isn't right. The arm is too skinny. The head swings too much. It's still just as antagonizing, but something about this one is different. Kane at one point was asked what this life was, and he referred to it as still life. Now, if he meant this in reference to the art form still life, that is art made out of inanimate objects, or if he was just saying this thing is still life, regardless, the community has referred to this creature as still life ever since. So, rather than going to the radio, which is a dead end, Ravi crawls through a hole in the floor. When he gets to the other side, he pushes a couch and a cabinet over the entrance right before the thing gets to him. Finding himself in what appears to be an old attic, he knows the barricade won't hold forever, and he continues. Before the running continues, we get this spliced-in shot of wood trim at the bottom of a wall, and something small and black seems to be growing up underneath it. Perhaps this is more of the bacteria or growth we've seen throughout the rest of the complex. We then come back to Robbie, who's making
supposed
his way
to be
through a
very
dark hallway.
important.
He comes to a room
Wish we knew
with
more.
stop signs, white floor signs, and a picture of Mao Zedong with candles lit around it. Again, this is more reference to Oriental and Chinese culture. It seems to
I really hope. There we go. I think that fixed it. Okay, I had to unplug and replug in my my Ethernet cable. Apparently, it doesn't want to function. I don't know what the deal is. Sorry about that. Everything seems to have ironed itself out. Where were we?
Multiplex doesn't just displace time, but location. Robbie continues through these concrete hallways, the setting very industrial, before he opens what looks like closet doors, find himself back in an office setting. He moves through here until he comes across these large windows. Windows that would seem at home along the edge of a skyscraper. He walks up to them and sees that the outdoors are once again bathed in a red light. City buildings with the illusion of buildings adorned around him. This place seems impossibly big, and the idea of getting out seems further and further away. Across the street from him, in the midst of trees, is a giant road sign, tilted on its side and now pointing straight up. Robbie continues through the complex and finds himself on another walkway, connecting the two buildings. He continues forward until he finds himself back in the yellow wallpaper we're familiar with. It seems he's lost the still life that was on his tail. He finds a hole in the wall to his right and sees that it overlooks the room with the chairs and the fake sky ceiling we saw earlier. Balanced up right next to him seems to be what looks like a book. It's either a book or a brick with some writing or print on it. If you rewind to earlier...
No, it isn't a book or a brick. It's even worse than that. Let me find it. It's like right here. Oh, that's the cardboard cutout. That's going to be important. Right around here. This, I thought it was a brick the first time I saw this too. Later on, people have figured out this is not a brick. It's a filing cabinet. Like, you can just barely tell when he shifts over to his right here in a moment. Right there. That's a tiny-ass filing cabinet. Like, there's the little handles, you know, all that. Why is a filing cabinet no bigger than a brick? Freaky as hell.
In the video, when he first walks into the ground floor of this room, we can see the book still balanced up here. We don't know what this is or why it's here, but its camera presence makes it feel important. Robbie keeps pushing till he comes to a hallway that has a gap in the floor. Similar to what Async noted earlier, this could be the discretion between two different points or different kinds of rooms within the complex. He pays no mind to it, but it's more of these fissures between two different kinds of space.
Oh, yeah. We saw this yesterday. Another pseudo gap. You know, very, very cool. How small are the items? That's a very good question. They can be any size, any shape, just about. There's not really a hard limit on how big or small something can be.
Faces that we've seen before. And then, making his way to a large hallway, Robbie finds this. A cardboard cutout of a caveman standing upright on its own in the middle of the hallway. There are no other indicators around it. There's no clue as to its purpose or how it got there. But here it is, another artifact from something that might have been human at some point, but here feels so alien. Robbie keeps moving forward, finding himself in another wide office space until he comes to a room with a fake house. There is a lot to take note of here. The ground is covered in discarded clothes. Charred stains and marks of perhaps blood stretch on the floor to his right, leading off to a dark tunnel. The walls and ceiling are blue with white blotches, seemingly meant to give the illusion of the sky. This seems to be reminiscent of a house in the countryside, surrounded by nothing but trees and air. But here, it's a blue box with part of a house in it. The clothes everywhere feel reminiscent to things that we've seen Async come across. Remnants of people. They're covering shed for some reason.
Now, the clothing, I think, is a very big tell of some event that has happened somewhat recently. Maybe a few years at most. We don't know exactly what yet, but there are piles of clothes in the trailer for the Backrooms movie. That's not good. Like, I don't know if that's something the complex put in, you know, like, did the complex generate this pile of clothing here? I don't know. But it's certainly not what it should be. And then, to make matters worse, we have a statue of some kind phased partially into the ground. Strange. So that cabinet can be like a clown car and the items inside are huge when pulled out. I don't think that's how it works. I think it's, you can have the filing cabinet itself be as big as a small brick. So about two hand palm sizes big. And everything inside it would correspond to the proper size it would be for that brick. So you'd have tiny little pieces of paper with files and stuff and info on them. It's crazy, but like, I don't think the items inside can be bigger than the container itself. The world itself does not break normal conventions in terms of like, volume can only be so much. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't defy the laws of physics. It's just generating these items in weird ways. You could make a real-life filing cabinet no bigger than your mouse, for example. If you have the right items, the right materials, yeah, that's totally doable. Why would you? I don't know. Filing cabinets are supposed to file away important papers, you know, files, as they used to call them. It makes no sense to make a filing cabinet as big as your mouse, like half the size of a small keyboard. Like, what would be the value in that? But yeah, you could theoretically do it. At the end of the day, you know, nothing here seems to necessarily be impossible. It just seems to be really freaky and improbable. Like, why would someone do this?
Then we come across something that Async hasn't seen before. In the floor, seemingly fused into the ground, is a person, or the statue of a person.
It's a statue,
not a body,
not a person.
calcified. We don't know what this is, but it sits there, still and lifeless amongst the clothes around it. Was this somebody? Is this the complex trying to approximate the image of somebody? Is this what happens to people who fall through null zones and are perhaps trapped in the in-between? Is this what happens to people like the girl at the end of Found Footage 2? The internet consuming them, making them a part of the space. We don't know. Whatever.
That actually does kind of make a little bit of sense, what happened to Madison at the end of Found Footage 2. Maybe she did sink into the ground and that's just the end of her and she's dead. But
it is. It's terrifying. Robbie continues forward and makes his way into the open house. Inside, there are black footprints across the ground. Someone's been here before him. This house is far more detailed than other similar spaces we've come across. Not only does all of the architecture make sense, the kitchen is where it should be, the table is where it should be, but the details are far more explicit. There's cooking implements on the kitchen countertops, a bottle of whiskey on the kitchen table, the lights, couches, everything.
That's a bottle of Jack Daniels. I love that.
Thing seems in place, but something seems wrong. The footsteps lead to a chair.
Like, I have seen so many bottles of Jack Daniels over the years. And this is really freaky too. There is liquid, or the stains of maybe formerly liquid, still in this bowl. And there's a foot, or rather a boot with a foot in it.
It's tipped over. Just beyond it, there's a shoe surrounded by black marks that seems half stuck in the floor. While standing here, Ravi begins to hear footsteps around him. He looks towards the front door and again sees more detail. A lamp, a bookshelf, a fake bass on the wall, paintings. Ravi goes to open the front door to see that it's a dead end. There's pieces of what should be a porch, but they're surrounded in brick walls of concrete. But it sounds...
Now, it is important to realize this house that Ravi finds... let me go to the exact moment when he looks at it. Okay. It's like right here when he gets up onto the front doorstep. The welcome mat, even though that's kind of hard to see, the welcome mat is mirrored. It's mirrored left-right instead of right-left. Or, sorry, it's mirrored right-left instead of left-right. That's what I mean. The welcome mat is inverted this way. How much you want to bet the rest of the house is also mirrored? And so that this door should open to the right, or sorry, it should open from the left going to the right instead of the other way around. Crazy.
Sounds like someone is speaking to him right there. So, in desperation, Ravi calls out for help.
And once again, it's so hard to unhear Kane's voice. I love that he voice acts so many of his characters.
Someone out there?
I'm sorry. I don't know where I am. I need help.
You're on private property. You need to leave.
I'm trying, okay? I don't want to be
This is the guy who keeps coming around here trying to talk to my boys?
What? No, my name is Ravi, sir. I'm not trying to cause you any trouble. I'm just lost.
Ravi can't see this person, but he can hear him. The other person, other than the fact that Ravi's speaking to him, doesn't seem alarmed by the situation. He's asking if this is the guy who keeps coming trying to talk to his boys. Neither of them have any idea what's going on, and they continue speaking.
My family's trying to sleep. Leave or I'm calling the police. If you really need help, I'll station a quarter mile down the road.
Listen, I can't. I've been walking for like 9 fucking hours, man. Where the hell are we? I can't even see you. Actually, do call the cops. That's fine. Just please help me out here.
I wonder what would have happened if the man on the other side of the wall, or the wall dad as we like to call him, I wonder what would have happened if he had actually called the police. If he just got so freaked out, he's like, I'm gonna call the cops. I'm calling them. And then they show up. Like, that would have unironically been really freaky. Where would things have gone from there? Because that could have had, I mean, good God, a police officer or two getting involved with this backroom stuff. Like, that would have been nuts.
Where are you?
What?
Well, the hell are you? I just look outside and I don't see you.
I'm in like a living room with a fish on the wall.
Oh, and also,
I'm
in a living room, and just beyond this door, which I assume is the back door that would normally go to the backyard or whatever, just beyond this door, there's a fresco on the wall back here. It's hard to see. The Gmod recreation of this, which was overseen by KanePixel's himself, the Gmod recreation shows this fresco far better. This is like, I don't know, this is just not something people pick up on. What is this fresco back here all about? Why is it here? Like, freaky as hell, man. Whoops, wrong one.
A living room with a fish on the wall.
Fish on the wall. Oh, and also in that Gmod map, the big mouth Billy Bass on the wall is also with its lettering reversed. So it's also presumably mirrored, but like the composition of the whole thing is mirrored, is my point. Very weird. All the big mouth Billy Bass that I've seen, come to think of it, I want to see if there is a left-right version or not. Big mouth Billy Bass. Okay, so that's, yeah, like that. Okay, so they're all going this way. I wonder if there's a reversed version or not. Because like when he goes in here and he's like, oh, there's a fish on the wall. Is it like the wrong way round? It is. Yeah. Big Mouth Billy Bass is the wrong way round too. So yeah, the whole house is mirrored.
You're doing it, you having a laugh over this?
I'm not. It's just, it sounds like you're on the other side of this wall, but this door goes nowhere.
The two of them can hear each other, but they can't see each other. And from what the other guy is saying, it doesn't sound like he's in the complex.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's in the real world. So Ravi is in this house in the complex, and this guy is in this house in the real world, which means the complex has created a near perfect copy of this real world location within itself. Not only that, but as someone is standing in the mimicry of it in the complex, someone in the real edition can communicate with them seemingly through a null zone.
Now, this also kind of reinforces the idea that, and this is something that we will see again, and it will definitely be in the Backrooms movie, null zones act as both a transition boundary for getting into and, if you're lucky, out of the complex, but they also act as a way for information about whatever environment's outside the null zone, just outside the complex. It acts as a conduit for information to get through into the complex to then be recreated, which is why this null zone, which is apparently directly in this wall, I wouldn't be shocked if Wall Dad and Robbie are literally like on opposite sides of the wall from one another, you know, but like transdimensionally, and that would be why there's an exact replica of this man's house, but mirrored on the exact opposite side, which would also indicate maybe something about this universe, or this layer of the universe that is the complex. Maybe something about it is like universally reversed, as in even molecules are in their mirrored halves. It's very freaky stuff. Very interesting food for thought, shall we say. That does beg the question of, because there is a principle in physics called symmetry, and specifically supersymmetry. It is a lot like the upside down, I suppose. But it begs the question, is symmetry violated here? And I mean symmetry in like the physics sense of the word, where the universe functions the same with time reversed, with energy levels inverted, with charges reversed. It's called parity. Yeah, I gotta wonder, charge parity, time parity, like, does this imply that most of the Backrooms is physically mirrored from its counterparts in real life? I don't know, it's very strange.
This is huge for an analysis of the series. It confirms that several of the spaces we see are at least mimic, if not one-for-one recreations of things in reality. That's a massive piece of the puzzle put together. The things we see in this complex are taken from real spaces.
Right.
Both Ravi and this man are standing in the same place, but in different realities. Or you could say different dimensions.
Different layers of reality.
This man seems sympathetic and tries to help Ravi by removing this space from the wall. And as he does so, this happens.
Thank you. I think it's...
What the fuck?
What the fuck? And the poor man gets sucked in. Ooh. No. And so, unfortunately, we assume this is Wall Dad's foot. We think. He fell into an exact replica of his own house, but mirrored. I guess he was actually over here somewhere, and not like on this wall, but maybe he was like elsewhere. And that when he no-clipped in, his foot went and fused into the ground, thus severing the front toe. Thus all the blood. He had to pull his foot out of his own boot. And that's why there's bloody trails leading all throughout this area. Really, really terrible stuff when you get right down to it.
Hey, happened? Hello?
And then
Sure enough, it seems there was a null zone here, and when the man went to help Ravi, he was dragged in, similar to the girl we saw in found footage too.
Collapsed.
But he doesn't show up with Ravi here. Even though the null zone's right here, it doesn't create a reliable spot from this space to the other across both dimensions. Or if it does, perhaps it puts them at different times in the same space. I think this might be the case for one reason. In the background of where the man is speaking from, we can hear a commercial playing. It seems the man had his TV on, and the sound is transmitting through here. Kane doesn't put things in by accident, and the commercial we hear playing is from a freecreditreport.com commercial that aired from 2007 to 2009. So perhaps then Ravi is in the copy of this house from 1995, But when the man touched the null zone, he showed up, perhaps in the exact same place, nearly 15 years later. We may see what happens to that guy in the future, but for now, Ravi is once again alone.
Well, we actually think he got sent back in time, and that's, like I said, that's Waldad's foot fused into the ground. So he arrived before Ravi arrived, but then Ravi inadvertently made him get into the background. Like, it's weird.
Time passes, and we cut to Ravi later, now bathed in red line. He points the camera at himself and begins to speak. It seems that some time has passed, and Ravi is near his end. He could have been in the complex for days, or weeks, or months. Now in his final moments, he turns the camera back on to record his last testament. He speaks of a pleasant memory when he was at a park with his friends, remarking that he can't remember the sky. Ravi remarks that he just wants to go home, before saying that he was going to fix things, and the video ends. There's so many clues here, from the guy he speaks to, through the null zone, to the time discrepancies, to the Splendor Sun, to the Oriental symbolism, to the still life. We'll get to that analysis shortly, because there's only a few more videos to look at for now. Our next takes us back to Async for the lighting and tile survey. This is a presentation given to the Department of Energy by Dr. Julia Meisner. This presentation was on November 15th of 1989.
Oh hey, that was only 2 months after I was born.
Places lighting and tile survey pretty early on the timeline, 1 month after first contact, or in other words, 1 month after Async had stable access to the complex. This is when Async was just doing their research on the initial area past the threshold, and this video is simply their study of the architecture of the complex itself. To do research, they pull down one of the tiles and one of the lights from the ceiling. Looking up through the drop ceiling, they see something that looks completely standard. A subfloor above them, the lights connected to some central structure, HVAC ran above the drop ceiling. Everything looks perfectly normal, which makes it all the more odd. If the complex was just copying things we remember, then you wouldn't think it would copy all the infrastructure. Like, for example, you probably remember what the inside of your school looks like, but you don't remember what the plumbing, what the subfloor, what the insulation and heating systems looked like internally to the wall. So it's not like this place is just copying memories, it copies them well, at least in defined areas like the regular yellow wall.
It copies them enough such that it actually functions, because they even go as far as to say, once they cut the light out, it's powered by something somewhere. It's got a power system doing the job a power system would do. Where's the substation or the power state or the power generator? Like, where's the electricity for this coming from? Who's paying for all this, as I've often heard? And the answer is, nobody fucking knows, and it is a gigantic mystery. I don't think this is a mystery that will ever be answered, but if it is, it probably won't be answered anytime soon. But it is an interesting question all the same. Electricity doesn't just pop out of thin air. You have to actually go to a lot of trouble to generate electricity. So there is a dangling thread here that might one day be cleaned up. It might not be. It might be better not ever to answer this question, just because it's never going to be a satisfying answer given what we know about the real world. So, like, I don't know, it may just be one of those mysteries that has to remain a mystery. Some settings have that happen, you know. It is what it is.
Wallpaper of the complex, and most of this video is dedicated to the analytics of it. In the presentation, Dr. Julia remarks that these lights are connected to something. As if it was in any regular building, there seems to be a central power supply they get their energy from.
Yeah.
The ceiling tiles themselves are strange in size, being quite large at 1.14 meters by 1.27 meters. For context, a standard drop ceiling tile is 0.6 meters in both directions. But other than being large, everything about them is completely normal. It's composed of a mineral composition, standard of ceiling tile, fibers of amorphous silicate. Everything about it is completely accurate. The same for the ballast that holds the fluorescent lights. It's composed of galvanized steel with a thin layer of zinc. The lights are galvanized steel square, length, a little longer but very close to T12 fluorescent bulbs. The gas composition of the bulbs themselves and their wiring is again all standard. Julia also remarked that the ballast and lights seem in great condition. Despite signs that they've been running for some time, there is no sign of physical wear. In fact, they are so accurate that they even have product information on them. The ballast is a universal Type A ballast, manufactured in 1975 with its own serial number. The same applies to the light troffer, manufactured in 1973 in Pennsylvania, and even the bulbs have a Sylvania label on them. There's something about this that feels menacing. It's one thing to contextualize the complex as a facade. It's just the cardboard standees of our reality to make us perhaps feel at home or approximate our existence. But we expect if we tore down the walls and we didn't find another room, we would find some dark void. We would find the absence of everything. But no, we pull apart the ceiling and it's just more ceiling. The subfloor above is also haunting, implying that you could dig up and find yourself in yet another room. This is just one layer of many. It's not even an approximation of our memories. It's an approximation that's better than our recollection. When I asked Kane what his favorite episode of the series is, he said it was lighting and tile survey. I think that's fitting because this is a detail most of us wouldn't even think about.
I like it.
Who manufactured the lights that are in the complex? But giving us an answer to a question we didn't know we needed to ask raises more haunting questions. Why are the Backrooms so good at being us? Why is it so picturesque to reality? Or at least why is it in some details, but in other, it can't remember how chairs work or where kitchen ornaments are supposed to go. When it comes to what it does make, it makes them perfectly. Leaves more questions as to what the true state of this place really is. This leads us what is to date the most recent video on Kane's channel about the Backrooms, besides the movie trailer. In between lighting and tile survey and this upload was yet another series Kane started called People Still Live Here. I'm really interested in People Still Live Here, but I can tell that there are more episodes that are going to come out to make some things we've seen make sense. So if I was to make a video on it now it'd just be pure speculation with not a lot of grounding. So I will cover People Still Live Here at some point, just after a few more episodes are out. But after all the episodes that were uploaded, we got another Backrooms entry in Static Dead End. Static Dead End was dated to May 29th of 1990, meaning that this is, to date, the furthest episode we have in the async 1990 timeline, and meaning this occurred only a few days after the events of Reunion and Damage Control. So our video picks up right after everyone's figured out what really happened to Peter. By what really happened, I mean the time skip and him still being alive. If he's alive after running away, I'm not sure. They're all being told that once again he hit his head. We open with shots of nature as Marvin is on a phone call with George. If you'll remember, George was one of the researchers who was with Marvin and Peter when Peter disappeared in informational video. Marvin is furious, saying he doesn't like this and he doesn't trust the company. George is trying to reassure him that they all want the same thing. As they're talking, Marvin seems to blame async for Peter's death, fittingly so. We see a room where on a whiteboard, someone seems to have drawn the street from Pitfalls, complete with the tunnel and trees around it. We see a label in the top left for room 14D plus 228. This makes sense because 14D is the room with all of the pits, and 228 must be the designation for this street. We see a closet space with things that async used to depress the DOE in presentation. A model of the initial threshold, pictures on the wall of how houses could be built in the complex. Marvin worries that they may be next. What happens if async considers them a liability? George remarks that it's okay, that they'll get through this, and then cut back to what async is doing in the complex.
Totally won't
in room
send its
14D,
ninjas after
Pitfalls,
you.
we can see the completed walkway that allows researchers to step over the pits. They're also creating a sort of scaffolding, seemingly to lower people down to the street that Marvin previously fell through.
Yeah, I hope they go
and now this
explore
door
that
we had
place.
so many questions about, the door at the end of the hallway.
They're probably
now
going to get
it's open,
jumped.
and we can just walk right into it. And we can see the thing that Mark was so concerned about getting footage of in Pitfalls. In this room, at first, we see more hallways until we find something strange. Along one wall, the texture
stretching
isn't
phenomenon.
printing correctly. Where it should be the regular wallpaper, it looks like the wall is expanding. Async has put up sections of tape along the wall to monitor it, and sure enough, assuming these all started as squares, they're beginning to stretch out. The complex is either growing or shrinking in this space. This isn't the first time we've seen a design like this. If you'll remember all the way back in informational video, when Peter was walking by himself and came to the room with the green floral wallpaper, he saw a similar thing where it looks like the design was stretched as if the room was moving. And here, for whatever reason, it seems the complex is doing the same. If you'll remember, all the way back in Pitfalls, when we saw the open door across the room, there was a distinct green glow coming out of it. And then when Mark got to that door, he said he needs a camera now. And if you'll remember, in Found Footage 2, right before the video ended, the walls began to move as the green lightning, as I called it, began to appear. Perhaps this green energy indicates a change in the complex. And the reason it was glowing when Mark stepped up to it is because he was actively witnessing the walls moving. That would explain why he wanted a camera immediately despite Marvin falling into a pit. Now the greenness has gone away, but the after effects still remain. We can see where the complex itself was stretched. Marvin continues along the stretched walls until he comes to a new room that is weird even by the backroom standards. This room is carpeted with tile walls, but all of the effects in it seem off. It's as if a soccer ball, a chair, a table, a couch are all half melded into the
When my brother first saw this, you know what he called it? King of the Hill.
floor. Even sunken sections of the floor implies that the floor melted into itself. Perhaps because this room was printed too hastily, or perhaps because of async's meddling or something, it began to compress on itself, the artifacts that were within it began to deteriorate or become reabsorbed or didn't finish separating themselves from the wall of the back room around them. Perhaps if you think of it like a cell, it didn't get to properly divide before we laid eyes on it and it quit. Or alternatively, perhaps the complex was absorbing this area and didn't finish. You could even theorize that this presents a treadmill mindset of the complex. Perhaps it doesn't exist beyond what we interact with, but as we get closer to the edges, it prints more. Maybe that's why when the team got there in Pitfalls, they saw the green glow, and now that they're traveling through it, there is rooms you can step into, but they haven't had the time to finish creating as they should in a better mimicry. The remark on the weirdness of the room they're in, the final moments, the camera traces to a lawn chair atop a mound beneath the carpet. With that, the video ends. Again, as we get more answers about the complex, there are more questions. Sure, we know that people can be in the same place, and we know that the complex copies real spaces. But what's that mean for the green glow or rooms like this? With every answer, we get more questions, and I'm sure there will be a lot more asked before and after the movie comes out. But there's one more video that I haven't covered that I've been saving for the end that I want to talk about now. As a matter of fact, it's the only video in the Backrooms series that does not have the label Backrooms in front of it. That video is I Remember. I Remember is the shortest video in the series, clocking it at only a minute and 30 seconds. It's also the only video that doesn't show up in the official Backrooms playlist. And I think that's because it's not something we're meant to know everything about now, but it certainly points us towards a lot. The video opens with the camera watching the sun peek through a window as wind chimes are heard. Someone begins a recording and begins to narrate. As they do, we see a missing persons poster on the ground, images of the sea and the sun splitting in on themselves, just like the sky did at the end of Overflow.
Freaky.
We see async's hallways and conference rooms bend and stretch on themselves. A diagram on the whiteboard tells us that cell images clustering leads to individual cell clarification. Perhaps the researchers were trying to better understand the bacteria, or something else we don't know of yet. We see old computers and servers, the early days of async. We see the facility itself bend and bow. We see the same for the prototype that led to all of this in the first place. And then we see an image of a researcher in a gas mask with a protection hood standing before a great light. As he does, the image of himself bows as the light goes from yellow to green, witnessing something remarkable that is stuck with our narrator. For finally, we see an image of old computers lining a room, the image itself labeled CRN-S8R3. And as the image stretches, I Remember ends. This final image seems to be of computer room. Perhaps the labeling, unless it's some code I haven't figured out yet, is just a designation for this room. Or perhaps something in this room that was meant to be remembered. Like perhaps it means computer room 9, slot 8, row 3, for example. There's not a lot we can do with this image yet, but there is a lot we can do with the narration. The narration, read during this video, reads as follows. I had a home once.
Freaky.
A manor overlooking the sea. Upon the world, this was a vestige, calling forward unto strangled ears. But when the skies turned dark, the house was taken by the sea, a pillar truncated, cast down to the seabed with all the other forgotten things. But I remember fleeting shells sinking ever slowly, folding downwards to themselves, forever tearing along the seams of the sky until nothing remains except the eternal ghost. And you ask yourself, could there ever be anything greater than this? You've always been here.
I believe this is a manor overlooking the sea is async. Upon the world, this vestige, calling forward unto strangled ears. This was them trying to do their research and figure things out, but they were too ignorant. But when the skies turned dark, that is when times got tough, the house was taken by the sea. Async was taken by the government, the Department of Defense or Department of Energy or whatever. A pillar truncated, cast down into the seabed with all the other forgotten things. This isn't that Async was swallowed up by the Backrooms, which is what a lot of people initially thought. This is the Department of Defense or Energy or whoever getting their mitts on the place and then mothballing it, killing any forward momentum Async was, making. So I think they are forced to leave the Backrooms, and that we will probably see something big happen in the Backrooms movie in 28 days. That will hopefully explain this a little better.
I believe that this is about the complex, and I believe it's about the complex before it was ever even called that. And I believe the man we see in the mask and the man we hear narrating is Ivan Beck. And I believe that everything that we have witnessed thus far has been because of him. I mean, as Kane said, he's the protagonist and the antagonist of the story, right? All of that I'll talk about in a moment, but for now, to make sure we're all on the same confusing page, let's talk about the timeline. And let's do it in the only stupid way that I know how. See, look at this. It's color coordinated and everything. It's also the best I can do, so this is what you're gonna get. I mentioned most of the upload dates as we went through the series, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, Overflow is the earliest event we have on the timeline, occurring sometime in August of 1972. This is what caused the experiment that caused the green light to form, and as far as we know, is the first time humanity made contact with the complex. Or, the energy that's behind the complex or something. After that, we don't have an event until May 10th of 1982, when Prototype takes place. During that gap, we know that a lot of research has been performed, because what started as an experiment that seemingly accidentally opened up the complex is now becoming them teleporting marbles to it, or trying to access it. Now, according to the dialogue we hear at the beginning of the third test, we're told that in April of 1988, Ivan Beck gave a presentation to the United States government. In that presentation, he said that if Async was allowed to conduct their research on the complex, it would offer a solution to all future storage and residential needs. And obviously from presentation, we know that he's referring to putting people and things in the Backrooms. This is important context because Beck gave this presentation before Async opened the threshold. That means sometime before April 1988 and either Overflow or Prototype, Ivan Beck figured out what was in the complex. Or he at least figured out it was a space that you could hypothetically put people and things in if you could open the door. But remember, Async didn't manage to keep the door open and explore it until first contact. So that means somehow Ivan had information about what the complex was before Async did, and that'll matter for the theories later. So in April of 1988, Beck gives this presentation, and by July, the third test happens. So seemingly, the presentation went well, Async began their research, and then by October 17th of 1989, first contact happens, or in other words, Async conducts their sixth test and manages to keep the doorway open. So we have what we know so far to be the first interaction with the complex taking place in August of 1972, and then Async gets the threshold open in October of 1989. So 17 years of research occurred between Overflow and first contact. 1 month later, in November of 1989, the lighting and tile survey takes place. So Async took a good month to map out the dimensions and specifics of what they were seeing. Of course, as we saw from lighting and tile survey, whatever mimicry this place was, it was pretty good at it. Then we move into 1990, when a ton of stuff happens. The vast majority of Async's role in the story occurs in 1990. As soon as Async managed to open the threshold in first contact, people began disappearing, and the earthquake also occurred, as mentioned earlier. But the video missing persons occurred on February 3rd of 1990. I believe the first date we get for a person going missing on one of the missing persons posters is in December of 1989, but by February of 1990, or just a couple months later, it's become a noticeable problem. Because of Async's meddling, people are falling into the Backrooms. At the end of the month, on February 29th, or March 1st, as we talked about the leap year.
Now, I do want to say, this idea that everybody vanished, or rather everybody starts disappearing more frequently due to Async having done something. I gotta wonder, is that 100% the case? Are we being misled? Is it truly all Async's fault because reasons? Don't know. I have to wonder if there's another factor here we're not yet aware of. Just some more ideas to keep in mind.
discrepancy. Informational video occurs when Peter skips ahead 2 months. The rest of Async believes him to be dead or gone and fake his death. About a week later, on March 5th, in Motion Detected, Async sees on the security cameras that there are things in the complex that are getting very close to the threshold. About a week later, on March the 5th, Motion Detected takes place. This is when Async sees on their security cameras that these life forms are in the complex and very close to the threshold. We're not sure what Async's reaction to this is, but we do...
Are they random civilians going missing? Yes. Random, normal, ordinary people.
You see what their reaction is to the next major story event, Pitfalls. It's very possible that, similar to their knowledge of Peter being alive later, to keep things running smooth, Async leadership didn't disclose to the rest of Async that they saw something on the security camera. Regardless, 2 months later, on May 6th, Pitfalls and Report take place. Pitfalls being the episode where Marvin falls into the pit and then sees the life form in the house at the end of the red street. He gets out of there, the camera's passed off to Async leadership, and on the same day, May 6th, they review it and become terrified by what they see. As we now know Clyde to be the one who reviewed the footage, and given his conspiracy with Ivan Beck to keep Peter's existence a secret, it's possible that when Clyde saw the life form in Pitfalls, he wasn't so much terrified by its existence, but rather terrified by the fact that now they can't keep it a secret. Or if they did know of the life form's existence, they thought they would stay away from people, but after watching the life form chase Marvin, that theory's out the window. So after Pitfalls and Report, Async boards up to the opening just past the threshold, and for the time, stops their investigation further into the complex. Which is really bad timing because the next day, on May 7th, is when the Department of Energy is coming to see if Async is deserving of more funding. This is good explanation as to why in presentation, when it shows the Department of Energy people being toward the complex, they're just in that initial room past the threshold. They don't go past the opening that is now boarded up. And we see in presentation what Async's plans are to allow the government to use the complex for housing and storage. The Department of Energy is there for a few days, and while they're there, on May 8th, is when Peter shows back up. Which, now that I think about it, I guess Peter got to what used to be the opening back to the room in the back rooms that led to the threshold and saw the giant boarded up wall. And we don't see it, but I guess he just broke through that, I guess. He's just built different. But Peter is alive. Only Clyde and Ivan Beck and maybe a couple other Async leaders know of this, so they put Peter in ice.
The bordered up portion is a completely different route. Peter did not take that route. He was on a completely different leg of the complex. So he never ran into or across the bordered off section that led to the pitfalls or the neighborhood. Peter was in a completely different sector, I guess you could say. He had no reason to go that far to be over there in the first place. So yeah, of course he missed that. He was never in the right spot to begin with. But yeah. But Async would notice this for reasons, I guess. Anyone else just thinks it's unusual. Yeah. It's possible that this is all data that has been aggregated and is being presented to us, the audience, well after the fact. And that the connections are obvious now. So maybe we're not being misled. Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe we are actually being given the full story. Who knows? Still too early to really say right now.
Isolation while they figure out what to do with him, and then on May 22nd, when they are moving him to above ground housing, he escapes into the complex. And then 3 days later, on May 25th, is when Peter, hiding in the complex, attacks Mark and Marvin, stealing the shotgun, and then running back through the Async facility, as we see in Damage Control. All of that occurs on the same day, and then seemingly at the end of the chase, Peter falls and hits his head and dies. Or if you go by my theory, he's still out there somewhere, but we don't know for now. Despite this revelation within Async that the higher-ups kept Peter's existence or post-death existence from them, they don't hesitate on their explorations, and on May 29th, Static Dead End takes place. This is when Async has covered the pits from pitfalls and made it to the room on the other side, where we can see the backrooms moving. Again, this could be them expanding or shrinking. We're not sure yet, but we are sure that it has something to do with the green glow, as we saw all the way back in Pitfalls. And so far, that is the end of our Async timeline. The last thing we see is them doing research in the backrooms, discovering these expanding walls in the door past pitfalls, and then there is a huge gap in the timeline, because our next event doesn't take place until over a year later in July of 1991. I mean, it's not huge compared to like the total time length we're working with, but it is huge considering that all of these were within like days or weeks of each other. Because after the last we see of Async's research, Found Footage 1 happens where we see a complex devoid of Async. Does that mean something happened to Async in there? Or it's also possible that the complex is just really big, and the chances of someone falling into the back rooms and then coming across Async are pretty low. I mean, it'd be like dropping two people at random points in the ocean and hoping they swim into each other. Yep. But the first Found Footage happens, and the cameraman named Kane from that episode is seemingly attacked or killed by a life form, and then his camera falls out of the back rooms back into our reality. Obviously, we know that the threshold at Async allows people to come and go from the complex, but we haven't seen that done with null zones yet. We see people speaking through the null zones at the end of Found Footage 3, but no one actually passing back over. Although that does seem...
We see that in the trailer already. We know for a fact they can go through and pass back and forth through a null zone. So that's gonna happen. Beware.
to be what's happening in the movie trailer, but we'll get to that. What we do know is if someone does go through the null zone that the camera fell through, that would be really bad, as that drops you back into reality, like 3,000 feet in the air. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine surviving the backrooms and getting out of it, only to fall to your death? Well, after the first found footage, we have an even bigger time jump, because nearly 4 years later, found footage 3 takes place in April of 1995. I mean, we see all the chaos that can happen to the complex in a couple months. Imagine what can happen in 4 years. And in found footage 3 is when we see the speakers with the weird music. We see signs that people have been trying to survive in there. We see the signs of the sun's splendor. We see a still life attack Ravi, and we see communication through a null zone, seemingly also through time. And then 4 months after that, in August of 1995, found footage 2 takes place, where the girls discover the null zone and she's experimenting with it and is pulled in. Again, we see an even further decayed complex. We see the growth over the walls with the picture. We see another life form attack, and we see that green glow everywhere, especially at the end. Perhaps if that green represents energy and it represents the complex changing, something async does in this gap around here causes the complex to become far more unstable. Perhaps Ravi was just lucky, I mean, comparatively, in found footage 3 to come across areas that weren't unstable, but the cameraman in found footage 2 certainly found it. But this also shows how significant the time jump was for the camera in found footage 1, because it's not until after over a year has passed since found footage 2 that the camera from found footage 1 is recovered on September 23rd of 1996. Keep in mind, the only reason we have the date of July 1991 for found footage 1 is because that's the date on the clapboard at the beginning before that guy fell into the complex. So he might have skipped to 1996 when he fell in, or the camera did when it fell out. If he skipped when he fell in, then that means the complex we see from found footage 1 could have been one post all of the green glow and weird stuff we see in 2 and 3. Again, the complex could just be big. It could just be that the 3 found footage videos are missing everything happening with async because of distance, or the consequences of what we see in the found footage series is because of everything async did in 1990. The damage they left could be what the found footage series is experiencing. And then finally, the most forward jump we have on the timeline, again because of the commercial, is the fact that the dad who is speaking to Ravi in found footage 3 is doing so from 2007 to 2009. Communication in the complex, even with those outside of the complex, can span decades. And this isn't even considering the fact that the poster Ravi sees on the wall is from 2022. But that also makes it interesting that the complex doesn't seem to be pulling anything that could be from before 1972. I mean, sure, we see grandfather clocks and old inventions that could predate it, but we don't see like stone huts or like blacksmith shops. Everything we see could perceivably exist in a post-1972 reality. But why? Well, I have a theory as to why that I'll talk about later, but for now, there is one event on the timeline that I've kept from mentioning until now.
I want to say that fresco in the found footage 3 house was old, but I don't know. His thing fell.
I didn't mean to do that. And that is Clark's expedition, that at least some of it happens on June 29th of 1990. What am I talking about? Well, in the trailer for the Backrooms film, we can see our protagonist, Clark, exploring the complex seemingly for the first time. And when he comes across a security camera, likely async security camera, we can see on the security footage that it was taken on June 29th of 1990.
Yep.
That means that at least some of events in the film are set right here, at the end of the timeline we've been building up to with much of the async storyline.
Yeah.
When's the film set? The 90s? 93? 1990, okay.
June, July 1990.
Okay.
The YouTube series is just at the end of May 1990, so it's right there.
Okay, gotcha. So we're all within the same, like...
So we're going to see some real shit hit the fan kind of stuff in this movie. Like, this is... All the events up till now have been the gasoline pouring out steadily, and the events of the movie are going to be the spark that lights it. And I bet the Department of Energy is going to immediately tell Async, you stop this shit right now. You cut that threshold stuff. You know, you discontinue it. You turn it off, leave it. You know, or I'll chop down that internet with my my lumber axe or whatever the fuck. Oh man.
Like a few months of each other.
Yep. This gets me pretty excited for the film. I mean, more than I already was. Because most of my questions about the series are right here.
Oh, yeah.
How do the async events resolve? What did they do to the complex that makes it the way we see in the found footage section?
It doesn't end
stated
well.
that this movie will work as a standalone, but it's also, of course, a part of the series.
Is the film going to tie in to the YouTube series? Is it like it's a continuation of it?
Yes.
But it will also be
Told you.
standalone. The people that aren't familiar can
Also, yes.
can walk into it. Okay.
Yeah, that was a massive piece of just the development of this. I have never been okay, like, retconning or breaking continuity. I think the film we have is one that absolutely is open to new viewers. I think it fits perfectly with where the YouTube series was heading. It bridges and sets up a number of things that I want to dig into more in the future.
Told you. I told you, you need to have the deep dive. You need to know what's going on, because the movie will be fine for the normie audience who will only maybe see it one time. But there are going to be things you miss. There are going to be parts of the story. There are going to be gaps that might get filled in if you know about the whole series in advance. Like, There's reason for this.
And I think on all fronts, it just generally is perfectly in the continuity of the world that's been established.
So I think in the film, we're going to get a lot of questions about async answered that I've been asking up until now. But as it stands, this is every piece of the timeline that we have so far. So now that we've established that, let's talk about the fun stuff. And by fun, I mean the things that will inevitably kill me. So there's a few things I want to talk about, but the first thing I want to talk about is what is the complex? Literally. We can stew on symbolism in a moment, but for now, I'm asking what is it as it exists as a 3D space? Well, it seems in this recent batch of episodes, Found Footage 3 in particular, we get more information about it than we ever have. I've theorized since the first video that the Backrooms seems to be a place that amasses people's memories. Things that would otherwise be forgotten live forever here. But similar to a memory, it's not a perfect copy. At the end of Found Footage 3, we see what I think is a pretty good replication. In the blue house, it's good enough that both Ravi and the father can speak to each other from the same relative space, and Ravi can even identify details like the fish on the wall. But this room as well felt much more specific. There was drinks on the table, the chair was pushed over, there was signs of life in the house. All of the furniture and implements went where they're supposed to go. As far as copies go, the blue house is pretty good. But when we look at other spaces in the complex, that facade starts to crumble. Take for example, the room seen in Found Footage 2. Sure, we see something that's trying to be a kitchen and a space nearby that might be a kitchen table. The details are wrong, they're out of place, they're exaggerated. Or the house at the end that contains the life form, the one that the car crashed into. Seems to be a perfect layout of the house, but all of the details are missing, save for a few, like the picture on the wall.
There was a bed in a bedroom
details
too.
fade, but the structures themselves do come from something that does exist. Now, while I think memories are certainly what Kane is going for here, that may not be the vehicle by which places in the complex are created. There might be a physical explanation as to why some parts of the complex are accurate to their real-world counterparts and other places are not. For example, null zones. We know that null zones work for at least people to cross into the complex, but what if it allows space to cross over as well? At the end of Found Footage 3, when we see the most accurate structure that we found so far, what happens at the end of that conversation? The father falls through a null zone. We've already established that the complex isn't hindered by time. So regardless of when the father falls through the null zone, the fact that that house is so close to a null zone makes its signal stronger, or its image more accurate to its real counterpart.
Yeah.
Now, this theory also has some holes in it. If that were the case, then every initial room someone falls into should be pretty true to the Earth version, and then as they walk away, it becomes more distorted and dreamlike. But we know that's not the case. In Found Footage 1 and Found Footage 2, the first place they step into is already pretty deconstructed. Even if you want to say the null zones aren't true bridges. For example, say here you had 4 null zones that each have a counterpart in reality and a counterpart in complex. Well, the way you may expect them to work is to connect directly across to each other like a bridge. So if the father in Found Footage 3 goes through the null zone in his house, he should show up in the complex counterpart in his house. But again, the complex is so weird about space-time. You could step into this one and wind up in this one, you could step in this one and wind up in this one, this guy could wind up in this one, and maybe sometimes they are direct, but for the most part, there's probably no predicting. Again, it's not like the complex cares for space or time. But even if that's the theory you're working with, then the null zone you fall into should be similar to somewhere, with all the appropriate specifics of that place's reality counterpart. But unless there's a plethora of empty white and carpeted rooms somewhere and endless yellow hallways, that doesn't seem to be the case. The other theory is perhaps spaces in the back room become more accurate when it has a hold of the person whose memories it's trying to copy. Say, for example, that the yellow wallpaper and elaborate hallways come from the memories of someone who only had an interaction with the complex for like a minute. Well, that would make sense as to why the hallways don't make sense, because if we want to think of the complex as a scanner, it didn't have enough time to copy the image. Whereas if someone like Ravi falls into a null zone, well, now the complex has days and weeks to copy images from his mind, so his memories should be much more specific. Or I should say the manifestation of his memories. This could be an explanation for a weird detail that showed up in Found Footage 3. As I called out in Found Footage 3, we can see that in Ravi's house, he has a drum kit. And then sure enough, one of the things he runs into in the complex is a drum kit. If you ask me, this is too specific to be coincidental. The first theory to the complex that I mentioned could be true, and this space's proximity to the null zone that leads to Ravi's apartment could be the reason that it copied a drum kit, because in the real world, there's a drum kit nearby, but it could also be because Ravi's nearby, so it's just building what he knows. This is a theory that's plausible, but we don't have enough information on to confirm or deny yet. If in the film or later in the series we see someone interact with a place that they recognize from our reality, then that probably means that I'm right about the second theory. That's all it takes to be considered good at these theories. If you just throw enough stuff out, someone will think you're clever. So the
I think it's more that second one because of here in the trailer. In the official trailer. So we know that from the trailer alone, Clark runs a furniture store. And what does he find? A whole ass pile of furniture. Free merchandise. I don't think anything or anyone was stealing this stuff and squirreling it away in the back rooms. I think this was generated here. Like, this is all stuff that he might sell in his store. But that said, later on, when the cameraman here, they go into the furniture store to try, or rather they go into the back rooms to, try and explore. This guy ends up seeing, and see, there's more of those old clothes that I talked about Where is it? There is... No, too far. This thing skips way too much time at one moment. Fuck. It's one of the
Alright, you feel me?
darker, danker areas. I think I might be able to find it via this. Okay, so they lower him down. He goes in, explores everything, gets scared, comes back up. Clark has a stashed backpack in a hole in the wall. Totally normal. She goes in after him to figure out where he went because he's not showing up to appointments. Something like that. Fuck nuggets. Where is it? There is pirate stuff in the Backrooms here. And as we've seen from the commercial... Wait, might be here.
You feel me? Yeah. Follow my lead.
Clark, what is this?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I've been here every night since
It
I
might
found
only
the
be on
place, and I
screen
still
for
barely
like
scratched the surface. All right, just take it slow.
Good music. Very tense.
Oh my god.
Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up! What do you see?
All these rooms. This place builds them.
Apparently a lot of these were practical sets, by the way. Just so everybody knows. Yeah, where in the hell is it? There we are. Wow, no wonder I couldn't find it. It's literally like you can't see it on the viewfinder down here. Anyway, there are pirate motifs and ship wheel, things that are very clearly not like you wouldn't just randomly see this in a house. Also, it's no clipping, or it's partially fused into the wall. And that's because Clark's store is just on the other side. And it's copying slowly but surely little bits and pieces of information. And Clark's store is nautical themed. His is, Captain Clark. There's the little ship wheel right there. And it just is one of those things where, like, what it picks and chooses to copy is seemingly arbitrary, but it's definitely picking and choosing what it copies.
Complex seems to be a place where memories manifest, or at least images from our reality are copied over. There's a bunch of theories that the complex is some kind of simulation, or everything in the Backrooms is happening within a computer, as well as theories like everything in the complex is inside of the mind or a dream of Ivan Beck. And maybe metaphorically on that last point, but I don't think that's what's happening literally. For one, both of those explanations seem pretty lame, but we see so much interaction with the outside world and conversations with the DOE and people slipping into the complex that simulation or dream theory doesn't really track here. The complex is certainly a place, and it is certainly using information from our world. If it gets that information directly from the world or uses us as a conduit, we don't know yet. So now that we've talked about what the complex is, let's talk about some of the things that can be in it, of which currently there are 3 things we know of, besides, people. That is the Hay bacillus bacteria, the life forms, and the still life. Let's go through each of these, and in blue I have things we know about them, and in orange my speculation on them. So, starting with the bacteria that we saw in Missing Persons, we know that the bacteria mutated in the complex as compared to its real-world counterpart. We know from its discovery in Missing Persons that it at least can exist on dead bodies, and from what we see in Autopsy Report, we know it has the capability to preserve body parts. Now, for some minor speculation, we know that there are several black growths around the complex. These seem to be strains of bacteria that are growing everywhere. It seems that the bacteria attaches to bodies after death. In other words, they're not the cause of death. Sure, they have the ability to preserve organs, but we never hear anything about the bacteria itself being dangerous. But what we do hear is a lot of coughing. From Found Footage 1 to Pitfalls, anytime someone's in the complex for a while, they start to cough. I believe this is because of the bacteria's presence. It may not be lethal, but it certainly attaches to whoever it can. And being that small, it would explain how it's able to get through async respirators, as again we see with Marvin in Pitfalls. Now, the other entity who we see the most of in the series is the life form. The life form shows up in Found Footage 1, Found Footage 2, Motion Detected, and Pitfalls. Well, what we know about the life form is it has at least some mimicry. It's at least shaped a little bit like a human, and the noises it makes are reminiscent of people. A lot of people compare him to the head crab zombies from Half-Life. It sounds like there is someone screaming in there, it's just so distorted and muffled, what comes out is monstrous. They seem to be hostile or at the very least attracted to people. In every instance, once they see a human, they begin to chase them. We've never seen what happens when they get a hold of someone, but given their everything, it's probably not good. From Found Footage 2, we see that they definitely come from growths. Whatever that nest was in the back room of the house the car crashed into, the life form came out of it. It seemed to be waiting there in dormancy until someone came by. And we also always see them after human aftermath. In Found Footage 1, one showed up right after we saw the writing on the wall. In Pitfalls, we saw one right after Marvin found the camp where it looked like someone had been living. And of course, in Found Footage 2, one comes out of the room where seemingly importantly, the driver of the car died. Going into further theories with them, though, it seems that they're attracted to noise in general. Besides everyone making noise before they're attacked, we can see that on the writing from found footage 1. On that wall writing, we see phrases like, "I fear the sound doesn't stop," "God closed his eyes," but we also see "it hears me" repeated over and over. And again, this is right before the life form attack, so we can assume by it, the writer meant the life form. There's also the writing on there that says, "Don't move, stay still." So maybe like a T-Rex, if you just hold still, the life form won't see you. But understandably, everyone who's encountered one so far starts screaming and running. I also believe that the life forms are made of human parts. If you look closely, especially at the one in Pitfalls, it looks like human bones connected improperly, as if its arm is several femurs and a hip coupled together. Combine that with the tubes or organs that run over them and the fact that their calls sound kind of human, it seems that these things are made from scavenged human remains. Speaking of the dead, they also seem to have vocalizations from the recently dead. The found footage life forms make this kind of obvious, as it's someone screaming, which yeah, that's probably what they were doing before this 12-foot tall thing killed them, but it's especially apparent in Pitfalls, as the whole reason Marvin went over there in the first place is because he heard someone calling for help. And when we find a life form, it's repeating the phrase, "Is anyone there? Can somebody help me?" over and over. These were probably the final words of whoever was staying in that house. The life form now repeating it to lure others in. And again, from found footage 2, they build these large nests where people have died. It looks like in the same spot where the person in the car likely bled out, the life form grew around them, eventually consuming their pieces. And finally, we have our most recent and so far most scarce form of life in the complex, still life. We only see still life in found footage 3, and from what we see, they are very aggressive. They seem to run with much more precision and determination than the life forms. They are also very humanoid. Sure, the life form has elements of being a human, but other than the specifics, the still life seems to be in the full shape of a person. Sure, the details we can make out as it's running look kind of uncanny, but the way it runs, the way it crawls, looks like a person. But at the same time, we see that while they are human-like, they do not have human intellect. In other words, they know how to do things like knock on doors or turn off lights, but it doesn't know when to do them. As when Ravi's making his initial escape from it, he shuts the door, so the life form knocks. It's as if it knows humans are supposed to knock on doors, not when or why. So now let's talk about some of my inferences with the still life. What is the only other humanoid thing we see in found footage 3? The only other thing that has the shape of a person. That's right, the statue or statue thing coming out of the ground in front of the blue house. What do we also see in front of the blue house? A bunch of empty clothes and blood everywhere. The still life we see run at Ravi looks strangely colorless, and a lot of its details faded and blurred together. I think the half statue we see on the ground is an incomplete still life being birthed from the complex itself. I also believe that the still life might be trying to mimic human behavior. That seems obvious given my previous point about the knocking on the door, but what I mean by this is for some reason they want to seem human even though they clearly aren't. They seem to be brutal and leave carnage behind them, as seen from the site in front of the blue house and as seen by how they chase Ravi. And most interestingly to me, they seem to just be an icon of people. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the one we see coming up out of the ground in front of the blue house in found footage 3, again, assuming I'm right and assuming that's a still life, we see that it has a phone up to its ear. Why would a still life or any creation need to have a phone? Well, what if that's the state someone else was in before they were copied? If all the complex can make is recreations, then we can assume that the still life is a recreation of someone. And it takes a snapshot of whatever they are in a moment or their icon and then paste that into the complex. I don't know yet why this would make them so violent or why they would want people dead, but I think still lifes are a creation of the complex as much as the rooms are. And I have a theory that connects all of these forms of life together. Beginning with the still life, I think that the still life is the complex's attempt at creating people. We know it does the same thing with space, right? For some reason, it takes influence from the real world and copies it in its own walls. I think still life means the complex is doing that, but with persons. This could be something it's always done. This could be something it's done since Async's meddling, which would explain why the only time we see it is in 1995, 5 years after Async. And I think that's why Kane referred to it as still life. Again, inanimate objects given shape. These creatures are made up of the walls and grounds of the complex. That's why they seem to be made of the same material they're rising up from. And I think just as the spaces within the complex mimic our spaces, the still life mimic our behavior. It makes sense to me because just like how the complex doesn't know how tall the chairs are supposed to be, or where the sink or oven's supposed to go, it doesn't know when people are supposed to knock. The still life are the pieces of humanity with the specifics out of place, just as the spaces themselves are the places of humanity, but with the pieces all messed up. Just how the backrooms are a dreamlike representation of the reality we're in, the still life are a nightmare of what we are. But with my theory, I'm not sure why the complex would think, if the complex does think, why the complex would assume that humans are super violent all the time, unless that's like a commentary on us being awful. But I think a lot of the bodies we see in the complex may be the result of still life killing people who fall into the backrooms, to which those bodies are then infested by the bacteria. We know that the bacteria infest dead bodies, and we know that it can preserve organs. Why would the bacteria need to keep body parts around? Maybe because that's what life forms are made up of. And remember how life forms always seem to come from the mold or bacterial growth? Well, I believe that the bacteria and the life form are the same thing. Cycle of life goes kind of like this. After someone dies, the bacteria cover their body and preserve some elements that can be useful later, like bones or a heart or lungs or vocal cords. When enough of the bacteria have formed together, they create these elaborate colonies that are capable of motion. It doesn't have to just use body parts. There's a popular theory that the life form we see in found footage 1 uses a camera tripod for part of its composure. The bacteria could consume whatever it wants, but at least some of what it consumes, as we know from Missing Persons and Autopsy Report, is organs. Are organs. Is organ, whatever. And these bacterial colonies
it's food.
continue to grow. So it uses information gleaned from its last subject, things screams like a cry for help, and then uses that to lure others in. I think that's why we get things like in Pitfall, where we have a 10-foot tall life form that seems to be two bodies shoved together. This also explains why their movement is so jolted and clunky. I mean, it's a massive bacterial colony trying to get human parts to move towards something else. And honestly, my biggest piece of evidence for this whole thing is among the pictures that Kane posted to his Ko-fi account, or Ko-fi, however you pronounce it.
Ko-fi.
When he posted the very first image of a life form, he titled it Bacteria.
It's big. That fucker's tall. I mean, those walls are what, like 8, almost 9 feet tall? This guy stretches basically almost to the ceiling. He's like a foot short of that. Bacterias are not small.
So that would mean that the bacteria, and therefore the life form, is the only organic substance we see in the complex, and we can assume that Hey Bacillus came over with person or an animal at some point through a null zone, as it's not like they said the Hey Bacillus came from the complex, it just mutated there. While the only form of life we do see come straight from the complex seems to be inorganic, as it appears to be made from the structure of the complex itself. This leads me to believe that the complex itself can't create true life. It can create the shape of life using the components it has around it to mimic people, but these are effectively automatons, and a far cry from the organic life, mutated or otherwise, that we find in the complex. We know that the complex itself became less stable as async began to mess with it, hence the missing persons cases and the earthquakes. Perhaps the complex, like an immune system, is attempting to shake async off, hence the still life. And if the still life are effectively the complex's antibodies, well, that explains why they're so violent. They're not organic, they're not real life, but their job is to make sure that all the real life stays away. Perhaps the complex doesn't want anyone in it in the first place, and these null zones that keep opening are just a byproduct of async meddling. Also, I keep using words to describe the complex like wants or thinks, but keep in mind I'm saying that in a very loose sense. As if I said, if I drop this coffee mug, it'll want to fall. I mean gravity's going to make it fall, but you get it. Whatever force that is in the complex might be attempting to repel people. We don't know why or when the complex began to mimic human life, or why the bacteria mutated into these colonies that can create life forms that hunt other people down, but it may all be a symptom of the complex's affinity, willing or otherwise, to keep people out. I should also mention that if my theory about still life is correct, then there's nothing saying the complex has to make the still life look like a human. If these are just defensive measures of the complex system, then it could be anything that could ward off people. The mimicry could be based on a vehicle, or a statue, or a really tall paper mache giant on wheels. That's not me saying
I think they're just very good at hunting, because the bacteria are living creatures like anyone. And when it comes to hunting, mimicry is exceptionally effective. I don't know. It's pretty obvious these things are they're not necessarily of the complex. They are a byproduct of being in the complex for so long. It's almost like they've evolved to match their environment.
Put the rolling giant in the Backrooms. I'm just saying he can, and I don't like that. But a lot of these theories about the nature of the complex itself and the forms of life we see in it tie into things we see with async. For example, when Peter glitched into the future, we see him turn into a corner where he hears a
paper mache on wheels photos at the Backrooms. That's from the oldest view. That's nothing new or relevant to this.
Crowd of people speaking, and as soon as he hears them, that's when Peter skips 2 months ahead. We know from found footage 3 that Peter likely came across the threshold of null zone, somewhere where the line between the complex and reality is thinned, and he heard a crowd of people that seemingly are connected to the space, or the space with the yellow wallpaper at some point in time. Similar to what we saw in found footage 3, this thinning of the barrier is followed by a flash or a burst of energy that either throws someone into the complex, or as we saw with Peter.
But it's not the Backrooms, it's something unrelated. The oldest view, that was where the giant was from. The rolling giant is from this series. There we are. The oldest view. The oldest view is unrelated to the Backrooms, so just forget it exists for right now. Not relevant. Wendigoon was just scared because of stuff that he did with Kane. He was jump scared in Gmod a lot, and so he's kind of like scarred by the oldest view rolling giant. That's all it is.
Throws them forward in time. My theory with the life forms also ties into a lot of the stuff we see with async. Obviously, Marvin coming across the life form in Pitfalls, but also the remnants of people that async finds. If you'll remember in some of the early videos, they come across piles of clothes surrounded by this black growth, or mold. This would make sense because when someone is killed, the bacteria doesn't need their clothes, just their body parts. So someone dies, they're consumed by the bacteria keeps what it needs while the rest decomposes, and then as the life form toddles away, all that's left is the victim's clothes and a black stain. My theory of the life forms using human body parts is further supported by what async saw in Motion Detected, as the life form we see peering around the corner seems to have legs for a head. I also think something happens with async between what we see of them in 1990 and what we see in found footage 3 and 95 that causes async to realize that the life forms are attracted to sound. Hence, several of the speakers we see playing music set up throughout the complex. Perhaps these work as lures. As it seems, async is catching on to a lot of this. Like we saw in I Remember on the whiteboard, they say cell images clustering results in individual cell classification. Perhaps they mean the bacteria forming around bodies and then becoming life forms. And there's a lot of stuff they've started to figure out that we're just putting the pieces together on, like the nature of null zones and the Backrooms expansion, which the majority of the expansion stuff we see is in the found footage series, set after the 1990 timeline, when the wallpaper becomes stretched as if the space is growing, as if it hasn't finished its image yet. We even see this in found footage 1 for a moment. But there are a couple places we see the Backrooms expanding in the async timeline. For one, there's static dead end, where they're monitoring the growth of the rooms by putting tape up to measure its expansion. But on the timeline, the first instance of this we see is during Peter's flash forward. An informational video when Peter's wandering by himself, he comes across the room with the wheelbarrow and the axe. But as he goes further into the room, he comes across another wheelbarrow that is a copy of the first one, but much larger. And on the wall behind it, the wallpaper is stretching. I think this is effectively a room under construction. Perhaps the real space is meant to be outdoors, so the room approximates it with wallpaper that looks like trees and grass. We can see it growing in one place and copying the same wheelbarrow, but much bigger. It's like it doesn't know what to do with it yet, and instead of giving us a house, it's just the picture of the side of one. The complex seems to be changing, and I have a theory as to what's causing it. The sun has made an appearance in a lot of the imagery we see throughout the series. To get it out of the way, because I mentioned the Splendor sun earlier, I don't think Splendor specifically has significance to the series, at least not yet. If Kane is laying the groundwork to give Splendor meaning within this story, at this point we've only seen it once and there's not a lot to go with. For now, I think it's more of an Easter egg in preparation for some other series he has planned, or perhaps since the last episode of People Still Live Here was titled Sunshine, it'll make an appearance in that series. But for now, I think this is just an Easter egg. With my luck, the movie's going to be full of these things and it's going to be like the most crucial element of the whole plot. And if that's the case, then I don't know, I guess I'm mad about it. But what we have seen a lot is the literal sun.
You'll have
in
your work cut out
video,
for you.
We see an image of the setting sun overlaid on an image of the threshold. In home video, there's an extended shot of the sunset over the ocean. The sun seems to be a consistent theme throughout the series, and outside of the series that we'll talk about in a second. But before we even get into theory, there are a couple moments in the series that seem to be defined by the sun. And those are two of the first several moments that humanity made contact with the complex. So, as we understand it, the first time humanity interacted with the complex was on August 4th of 1972. This is when Overflow takes place. We see the piece of paper signed by Ivan Beck, and then we see the green glow. August 4th of 1972 is also, coincidentally, the date of one of the biggest solar storms in recorded history. This solar storm was so massive that it messed with several radio and television signals on Earth. Solar storms give off intense electromagnetic radiation, and it can affect everything across wave spectrums, from X-rays to radio signals and television signals to even the visible light spectrum. And what is the machine Async uses to get into the complex? Below proximity magnetic distortion system. So it would make sense that a solar storm would affect this equipment, and perhaps give it the supercharge it needs to make contact with the complex, to effectively break through to the other side. As the sun sets, there's a chance to witness a rare phenomenon known as a green flash. This happens when the atmospheric composition is just right to separate the visible light rays of the sun from its typical red and yellow light into its more base parts that includes the shorter wavelength of green. And on the same day Ivan Beck and his team seemingly make their first contact with the complex, what color do we see the system give off? A green glow. Now, I'm just touching the surface on this. There is a ton of nitty-gritty you can get into when it comes to the science within the Backroom series, and a channel I highly recommend for that is Little Red SM. She makes fantastic videos looking at the Little Red, but for Kane's Backroom specifically, she has hours of coverage over just this green light phenomenon. If you're like me and you really like to dive into a topic like this, I'll have her channel linked in the description. Can't recommend it enough. But that isn't the only time a solar storm makes its way into the story. If you'll remember, on the third test, when Async was trying to open the complex, they failed. It wouldn't be until the sixth test in October of 1989, in First Contact, that Async manages to open the threshold and keep it open. So what happened between the third test and the sixth test? Well, maybe it's because, in the real world, October of 1989 was home to several solar storms and solar flares. Meaning that once again, maybe the reason Ivan and Async managed to get through in First Contact is because the sun lended the energy, or distorted their magnetic system enough that it did whatever it needed to do to open the threshold. Did Async know of this and time it for that date, or was this just a lucky coincidence? We'll come back to the sun in a second, but for now, there's probably another question that you're asking. The complex seems pretty complicated. You have to have this super vast array of scientific knowledge and equipment and then get lucky due to energy of the sun, assumedly. And how did Async know to try to get into the complex in the first place? How did someone figure out there was something over there? And who's behind Async anyway? Who's been helming this exploration for the beginning? Well, I think all of those questions can be answered by one. Who is Ivan Beck? Ivan Beck's name shows up all over the series. He's the one who was called when Peter Tinch was discovered alive. He's the one who was supposed to be there for the presentation and damage control after Peter assumedly died. He was the one in the third test who was mentioned as going to the government to try to get funding for Async. He's the one who brought the body and autopsy report to be examined by a medical examiner. It seems that he's in the know on everything that's happened so far, and seemingly is the one who's calling the shots. His official title within the series is Vice Director of Async, but I don't buy that. If there is a true director, then they're probably just a figurehead or some connection to the government. Ivan Beck seems to be the one leading this project because seemingly he's the one who discovered the complex. We never see Ivan Beck in the series, and there's not a lot to infer about him from the KanePixel's channel, but there is a lot to infer about him in the Not KanePixel's channel. Not KanePixel's is KanePixel's second account, despite what the name may lead you to believe. Also, the profile picture for Not KanePixel's at the moment is that godforsaken sun. It's gonna haunt me in my dreams. On Not KanePixel's, Kane mostly posts his music. In case you didn't know, Kane composes all of the music for the series as well. Not only that, he makes way more music than he makes videos. So there are hundreds of unique tracks on the Not KanePixel's channel, each with their own unique title and cover art, and some of which you've been hearing throughout this video. And yes, that's right, Kane, who's already had as much success as he has had from visual storytelling, is also a musician. So sometimes I guess God finds it funny to give all of his gifts to one guy for some reason, but he also puts me here to keep them humble. So I want to let you know that he smells. not actually doesn't smell, but he could. You wouldn't know. I would. Maybe he does. Who knows? A lot of the music on Not KanePixel's is standalone and doesn't seem to relate to any of the series he's made, but some of it does. For example, The Oldest View has a soundtrack. There's several actual track songs and fake track songs for People Still Live Here. Like songs like Ocular Migraine would belong in there. Songs with titles like Shepherd Boss Fight, Wave, parentheses, Real. Probably not. There's also several songs on here that will probably never get used for a series, if I had to guess. Songs with titles like Glory to Lockheed Martin and Holy Land Algorithm and Oops, No More Job Market. He also made me a song called Iceberg Boy that you guys have probably heard in the intro to a lot of my videos. And there's also an AI song on there of me poorly singing Whistle by Jason Derulo. Next to a song called TikTok Sigma Male Trillionaire Grind Set.
Oh my
God. The picture for that one is Thanos in a suit coat. Youngest director in A24's history, by the way. I point all of that out because the unofficial playlist for the Backrooms series is a playlist on Not KanePixel's called Out of Sync. What's funny is I think only part of one of these songs actually shows up in the Backrooms series, but it's clear given what I'm about to talk about that a lot of the titles and imagery we see connects to it. For example, the first track in the playlist is called A Long Time Ago, and the artwork for that song is by George Brim. If you'll remember, he's the same artist who did the painting of the girl that showed up in the house in Found Footage 2 and in the related home video. On the cover for the song What the F*** Are You Talking About, we see an image of the sun setting over the ocean. In another track on this playlist, we see that same image overlaid with an image of async. This is for the song Sailing, Kane's cover of the Christopher Cross song. One of the lyrics to this song is If the wind is right, you can sail away, which if you'll remember is one of the things Peter wrote on the wall while he was imprisoned within async. So establishing that the Out of Sync soundtrack has a connection to the Backrooms series, I want to pose the theory, not like I'm the first to say this, that this soundtrack is about the life of Ivan Beck. And for my reasoning on that, we must first look at Kane's other Backrooms soundtrack, the official Backrooms OST. This is a soundtrack that shows up through most of the series. So while we've heard a lot of these tracks before, it's the cover art and titles that I'm interested in now. I'm going to say this, and it's not going to make any sense, but I have to say it now because otherwise all of the pieces I'm about to say are going to sound confusing. But I think that in that 1972 experiment, Ivan Beck not only witnessed the complex, but was injured by the ensuing energy that left him with amnesia and a missing eye, as well as his never-ending desire to make it back to the complex. For example, several of the tracks have this cover image. This is an image of a researcher standing in front of a green glow, or as we know now, one of the magnetic reactions that leads to the complex. We've seen this image before. It was the image that became distorted in I Remember, which we'll get to in a minute. But if this is a researcher witnessing a green glow, and assuming they're not within the complex, the only time we've seen someone in reality witness a green glow was in Ivan Beck's 1972 experiment, during the first contact. And the last song in this playlist that has this cover image is titled Congratulations, Ivan. Now this could be for some future event within the series, maybe when async falls apart and Ivan gets everything he's been looking for, but this can also be indicative of the moment that Ivan opened that first portal. But I think the most telling image we get of Ivan Beck through this playlist is the series of songs that has this cover. We see a man in a suit coat with a censored face. Behind him, we can see the charts of several tests, and in the bottom left corner, we can see the headline from the faked vineyard wreck that they used to cover up Peter's disappearance, something that we know was orchestrated by Ivan. Around him, we also see 8 rods pointed in on each other. This is the prototype machine that we saw in Prototype, or in other words, Async's first attempts to get into the Backrooms. And at the center of it is what would be Ivan's face, but instead it's covered with an image. This image is a picture of the sun during the August 1972 solar storm, and the spot that the solar storm would normally be in is covering Ivan's right eye. This also lines up with a few sketches that Kane has posted or shared to his Discord, including this image of what seems to be Ivan Beck with a headache. However, his right eye is obscured, and in the silhouette we see behind him, we see a projection of Ivan again with the right eye injured and the sun appearing in his head. Or this artwork that depicts a scientist working on the prototype with text around him that says, "Forever. You won't find yourself there because you don't really exist." And throughout the image and on the young scientist we see, the right eye is gone. Although through some of the other images it looks like the left eye. But maybe it's like, because it's a drawing, the left eye is normal because the right one's enlightened or whatever, I don't know. Establishing these things about Ivan, let's look back at the Out of Sync playlist. As mentioned, the first song is called A Long Time Ago. In a series of images Kane posted and has since deleted, among them he said that Ivan Beck was born in Karlovy Vary, Czechoslovakia in 1931. Karlovy Vary 31, or KV31. KV31 being the group who is conducting research on the low proximity magnetic distortion system. Now it's also worth mentioning that the name KV31 is in reference to a real discovery, as it's the name given to an ancient Egyptian tomb that was found in the Valley of Kings. But you can see the connection between an ancient tomb being discovered and the complex being opened. I don't think it's coincidental that KV31 also lines up with Ivan's place and time of birth. But a long time ago, when Ivan was a boy in Czechoslovakia, he didn't have to worry about all that. There are some tracks I could make reaches for, like Insight in Mind, which pictures an American community, potentially being when Ivan was young and immigrated to the United States. But for now, until we get more information about Ivan, I'm just going to stick with stuff that I believe to be true as it relates to the complex and his injury. For example, there's a track titled Post-Traumatic Amnesia, the cover art being of an eye showing several rooms within the facility bending in on each other. This is likely in reference to Ivan after the initial incident. There's another track on here with a really interesting cover called A Life Entropy Part 1 that has this cover image. And of course, just going to go ahead and point it out, that stupid sun is there off to the right staring at me, and I don't like it. This is a famous historical image called the Flammarion engraving. It's a medieval artwork that depicts a peasant walking to the edge of the flat earth and looking out past the firmament. Or in other words, someone stepping off the plane of our existence as it was understood then. And as he looks out past the sky and the stars, he can see everything. He sees the solar systems, he sees the heavens, he even sees an image of wheels within wheels, in reference to Ezekiel's depiction of the angel he viewed during his vision, leading to what is now commonly referred to as a biblically accurate angel. Again, even though all angels in the Bible are therefore biblically accurate. And also, yes, I found some way to mention them in this video. It's me. Of course I did. But if this playlist is in reference to Ivan, I believe this to be representative of him finding the complex, of him crawling out past the firmament, past the boundaries of what we know to be reality. There's a track called The Same Material that begins with a shot of a California evening, but then fades into an image of the threshold, and then an image of the threshold covered in green. There's a track called Sea Ice that has several nature shots, from ice floating across the sea to aurora borealis, notably green, and the sun rising over the ocean itself. Keep all this sun and ocean symbolism in mind for later. There's another track called Ivan Visits the Light plus Defy, which shows the sun rising on a suburban home. There's a track called Ivan V2, spelled IVN, which is a sequel to another track on Not KanePixel's channel that's just called IVN. That one features someone floating in the midst of green light while their whole face is shown. And then here in Ivan V2, we see that same floating image, only this time, instead of a whole face, we just see a single eye. Perhaps this is the moment that Ivan first experienced the complex, the moment he made contact with the energy of what was on the other side. Then there's a track called Visible Light, which shows a sketch of, seemingly Ivan, surrounded by people and the prototype. However, as the song goes on, it begins to change. The picture becomes blue. We see mountains rising beneath him. Behind him, we see what appears to be the ocean, and the colors stretch through the entire visible light spectrum from blue to red, and of course, ending with green. And currently, the final track on this playlist, titled Old Song, has another George Grimm artwork, perhaps now representing Ivan Old, a changed man from that first song a long time ago. And that's most of the symbolism of the timeline of the soundtrack. Things I mentioned earlier, like Sundown Entry Wound that shows the sun with the green flash, is especially applicable now since we have the theory of Ivan being injured by the sun itself. But there's a couple other tracks in this playlist that are particularly important. Those are Overlooking the Sea and You Have Always Been Here. If that sounds familiar, it's because both of those titles are quotes from the video I Remember. I believe I Remember to be a monologue from Ivan Beck. And if the soundtrack isn't proof enough, there's proof of that in the series as well. In the beginning of Overflow, when we see the night sky before we see the experiment, where Ivan Beck gave humanity its first touch with the complex, we hear a strange sound.
Oh yeah, wind chimes. Wind chimes.
Wind chimes. Kind of makes sense for the outside night sky setting, but it's not the only time we see it show up. At the end of Found Footage 2, when we see that the entire video was being watched by someone from their television, when we cut back to the television, sure enough, clong, 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 clong. Once again, we hear wind chimes. So it seems to me that these wind chimes are a tale of Ivan Beck. He was the only character, or at least named character we know of, involved in Overflow, and we heard wind chimes then. And if the camera from Found Footage 2 was recovered, it would make sense that Ivan would be the one to view it. And sure enough, there, we hear wind chimes. And then in I Remember, at the very beginning, we open with a shot of wind chimes. Without even looking at the Not KanePixel's channel, this is an indicator to me that Ivan Beck is the one speaking. So now that we know that our mystery man who's behind all of this is talking, let's think about what he has to say.
He must be a gigantic, sentient wind chime.
I had a home once, a manor overlooking the sea.
Or not.
Upon the world, this was a vestige, calling forward unto strangled ears. Ivan is calling back to something he had that meant something. In a world of strangled ears, of people who have forgotten, he remembers something that was important. But when the skies turned dark, the house was taken by the sea. A pillar truncated, cast down to the seabed with all the other forgotten things. This thing he had that was so important was destroyed, and it was lost along with everything else that had been forgotten. But I remember fleeting shells sinking ever slowly, folding downwards into themselves. He's still speaking within this metaphor for losing something and it falling to the sea, but there's something more here he's talking about, something that should sound familiar. Forgotten things, things folding in on themselves, forever tearing along the seams of the sky until nothing remains except the eternal ghost. He's speaking of something that wars against existence itself. And you ask yourself, could there ever be anything greater than this? Again, as we see that researcher who I believe to be Ivan witnessing the green flash for the first time, before we see an image of a server room, as Ivan closes with, "You have always been here." The same image being the cover image of another track on the Out of Sync playlist called Remains. So, what do I think he's talking about here? Ivan Beck believes he had something special. It was something that mattered until the sea took it. And now that he's lost it, he is doing everything he can to get it back. Whatever this thing is, it's so worth remembering. It's so worth going back for. It doesn't matter if it tears apart the sky, because what could there be that's greater than this? There's a few possibilities here. Either Ivan Ivan lost someone or something, and perhaps he believes he lost them to the complex. Or, say it was a loved one who died, perhaps Ivan thinks if the complex is full of our memories, maybe the memory of that thing or that person could still exist in there. Mausoleum, where you can forever access what once was. Or Ivan could be speaking of the complex itself. The memory he has of it is enough to want to get it back. It was something important. But the sea became lost within itself. There's a lot of symbolism that shows up with that between the sun and the ocean imagery. I think the sea is a great way to look at the complex as it relates to humanity. The sea, for most of human history, was an impossible, insurmountable force. It stretched on and on. It had to be full of monsters and was something we could never hope to venture into, let alone map. But sure enough, we did. And then we did the same with the moon. And we continue on in our discovery, but now humanity's found the complex. And just like that, once again, humanity is standing on the shore overlooking the sea, wondering how we could ever get across it. And here's Ivan, another sailor with a home by the ocean, looking at everything he's lost to it and wondering how could he do anything else. I believe Ivan Beck lost something to this sea, and it's something he wants to get back. And if it's not any one thing, it might be his memory. Remember, there's a lot of references to amnesia, that Ivan's forgetting something that he can't remember, but maybe the complex has. If Ivan suffered amnesia from his injury, but the complex copied his memory, then maybe, as he said and I remember, the sea took it from him, or at least as he sees it. That piece of him, what he's afraid he'll never get back, has always been there. Some take this to mean perhaps there is a mimic or a copy of Ivan that's been in the complex for decades. Some even saying maybe that's what IVN means. It's this evil or complex variation of Ivan. But I don't think so. I think it's part of his identity that he needs back. I think he was a sailor at the ocean, and then the ocean took everything he remembered. So what could he do other than sail into it? Maybe Async can open the threshold, maybe all of these secrets will come to life, and he'll find whatever he's missing. Hey, if the wind's right, you can sail away. And the sun, this impossible entity that seemingly blinded him and gave him new vision, might just be the wind he needs to do it. As a matter of fact, the sun and ocean imagery has been in the series as long as the series has been around. Because if you go all the way back to the first found footage and see the writing that someone left on the wall, above the shut eyes, we see a window. And when we look through the window, we see the sun over the sea. Ivan Beck is Captain Ahab, and the complex is his white whale. As the whale took Ahab's leg, the complex took his eye and his memory of something that mattered. And he'll die if it means getting it back. I mean, what could be greater than this? I think Ivan is an inciting character at the back of everything. As a matter of fact, I think he's the reason that the complex looks the way it does. In other words, I think he's the reason for the yellow walls. If my theory's right, then before 1972, no one had any interaction with the complex. Then Ivan's injured and he becomes the first prototype that the complex maps its system off of. Remember how Kane said and then deleted that he said that Ivan was born in Czechoslovakia? Well, he's also mentioned that the yellow wallpaper design comes from Europe. And if you find the source for this kind of yellow wallpaper, most of them originate in castles in Europe. I think before Ivan reached out to touch it, the complex was just a nothingness, a void of energy beyond the veil. As soon as Ivan broke the glass and let that veil in, he was the first thing it touched. And when it did, he became the first blueprint. The complex didn't get a good or stable look, but somewhere in Ivan's past, I guarantee you, he's seen yellow wallpaper with fluorescent lights. And that's all the complex had to work with for decades until Async showed up again. So that's what it did, over and over and over. The first time I ever spoke to Kane, when I made the first Backrooms video, I asked Kane who the protagonist of the series was, and he said Ivan Beck. Now with the hindsight we have, that makes sense. But then I asked him who the antagonist of the series was, and he once again said Ivan Beck.
According to you, who would you say the protagonist of the series is, if any at all?
Let me think. I have an answer, but it might not make sense. But I think that's why it is a good answer, and the answer is Ivan Beck.
Ooh, all right. Who, if any, is the antagonist of the series? Or what?
Ivan Beck.
Ah!
I think that makes sense. Ivan Beck is the agent at the back of all this. He's the one compelling the government to fund Async, his company, to push forward into the complex. And with that, he is both the captain leading the charge and the captain driving sailors to their death. He is the hero and the monster of his own story. Something Kane has talked about a lot is he doesn't like to think of Async as evil, per se. Sure, they've done wrong things like their handling of Peter and whatnot, but just as we did with the sea, just as we did with the moon, if humanity discovered something like this, how are we not going to reach out and touch it? They're scientists. They want to know what's beyond the veil, wouldn't we all? But perhaps their desperation to do something understandable will lead them and all of humanity to a horrible place.
A lot of what we see out of Async in the YouTube series is them disregarding the dangers of it, basically. Like them getting into trouble because they don't fully understand what they're tampering with. So is that kind of theme going to be continuous through the movie? I guess so, if it ties into the series.
I would say the ideas that you just brought up are for sure on display there. I would say what it really is the inclination to sort of look around a corner and dig for what's next. Because for me, I deeply hesitate on condemning human beings for that trait, but I think every single thing is pretty much broken down into what happens next. Like needing to cross an ocean, needing to, again, like look around a corner, needing to, just go too far sometimes. Even if it comes out in ways that seem benign or naturalistic in some way, it's always the same trait. And I would say very much so, like the Backrooms in particular, I view it in the context of the series as a neutral technology that's not inherently anything.
I think we're going to see more of Ivan as the series goes forward. I do not think, however, that we're going to see that much of Ivan in the movie. I don't know this. Like I said, I don't have any secret information as far as Ivan's concerned. I just cannot see how a succinct 2.5 hour movie, whatever, will manage to get across all of that in a satisfying way and become an Ivan Beck narrative. I think Ivan Beck is being saved for the web series, as it should. If not, then good luck explaining to your mom how solar storms affect magnetism magnetism in the theater next month. I think the story we'll see in the movie will certainly connect, but I don't think we're going to see the conclusion of Ivan Beck's character or get a whole grand arc about him. He'll probably get mentioned, which would be cool and would make me happy, but I don't want to see a resolution there. There's a couple things with Ivan Beck's character that I can't nail down yet. For example, at the end of I Remember, we see that picture of the server room, and there's also an image of computers or servers for the cover image on the track overlooking the sea. And I think that one's pretty self-evident. The sea is the back room, so overlooking the sea, the image is the systems that keep the threshold open. But I'm not sure what the server room is with the line, "You have always been here." Perhaps it's recorded data from the back rooms, perhaps it's the computers that were a part of the first threshold. A lot of people will point to this to tie back into the simulation theory that "you have always been here" meant you're always in a computer. Again, I think that's lame. Again, I'm making a lot of inferences off of things I think up until now, but there's some stuff that we just don't have the pieces for yet. So what do I think we're going to see out of the Backrooms movie? Well, like I said, I haven't been told anything directly. As a matter of fact, Kane's lied to me a lot so that I can't do that. But what I do have is a trailer. I think that trailer gives us a lot to work with. There are currently 2 trailers and a short ARG associated with the film. In the first trailer, the teaser trailer, we see a room in our reality as it goes through different iterations, becoming more and more obscure, eventually becoming the facade of a real room like what we see in the complex. Which certainly means I'm right about my dream theory thing, and I won't be proven wrong, and everything I've said in this video will be right, and Kane will not make me look stupid, assuredly. The film's protagonist, Clark, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, says this place builds room, or it's more like it remembers them. And the more it remembers something, the less it does. This seems to be in line with everything we've theorized so far. The complex uses spaces in our reality, but makes them different. Less detail, more abstract, maybe just from generations of recreating the same spaces over and over. Or as I theorized earlier, perhaps if it's using memory as a source, less access or time with people's memory, or distance from null zones, you get it. So everything we've seen in the teaser trailer looks pretty good and goes in line with stuff we've seen from the series. I can also confirm, having been there, that the final room we see in the teaser trailer is a real set. And I know I can say that out loud because Kane said that out loud, and if he didn't get in trouble, I'm probably fine. Probably. But in the official trailer, there's a lot more to dissect. For one, we see that Clark owns a furniture store called Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, which Ottoman Empire is an excellent name for a furniture store. In the trailer, we can hear Clark speaking to someone who we can assume to be his therapist or psychiatrist named Dr. Mary Klein, played by Renat Reinsve. Which I just want to say, I mean, obviously it's super cool to see Kane make it this far and get this film made and see all this hype around it. He certainly deserves it. But it's also really cool to see such high-profile actors be attached to it as well. I mean, Chiwetel and Renat are highly acclaimed actors, and Mark Duplass, who's also set to star in the film, has made some of my favorite horror flicks. Creep was probably the scariest movie I watched in high school. It's cool to see in how many layers this has become such a cultural thing. I'm really proud of Kane. Don't let him watch me say that line. Pretend like you didn't hear that. Clark is saying that in the basement of the furniture store, he seems to have found a null zone, although he doesn't know to call it that. A null zone that, considering he lived to tell the story to Dr. Klein, has reliable entry both ways. In other words, it's one of these good null zones over here. And remember how I said it's likely that the complex copies things that are near its null zones? And the reason people don't fall into a one-for-one recreation of their space is because perhaps the null zones change which one you go in on and which one you come out of. Well, for this reliable null zone, just like the one we see at the end of Found Footage 3, after Clark passes through, what do we see? A bunch of furniture piled up. This would make sense because right on the other side of the null zone is a furniture store. It seems that the complex is just copying things that are near the door. Clark turns down a long hallway and sees this. This looks like the cardboard caveman from Found Footage 3.
It does.
Previously, I thought that the caveman was maybe created by the complex because it's reminiscent of like old Geico standees that used to be outside of cell phone stores. So maybe the one we saw in Found Footage 3 was just kind of an odd single creation. But seeing it again here makes me feel a bit different. What if, for whatever reason, Async is putting these things up? I'll have more evidence for that in just a moment. Clark tells Dr. Klein that he's going to come back with proof and hands her a map he drew of what he walked through the complex. It's not the same layout, but this style of drawing a map reminds me a lot of Peter Tinch's that he drew right before the attack in Reunion. It then looks like the film is going to have some found footage segments, which is really cool. I mean, Kane's series is known for its found footage aesthetic, the old analog horror look. And it's funny because initially the analog horror format was just to hide the imperfections, the fact that it was in Blender. I mean, Kane's series looks amazing, but when you put the analog filter over it, in some places it's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. But because the series has like 100 million views based on that analog format, well, now it's just part of the show. And I'm really excited to see what he does with it in a live action setting. We see them come across a room with a Christmas tree and a bunch of half-sunken bodies in the floor that look like they're made out of the floor. If I'm right about still life, and these are a bunch of still lives, this is a horrible room to be in. We see one
they
room
come
that
to
appears
life
to be tipped on its side, as it seems our cameraman is walking on the wall.
And also, I know I haven't said anything very much
about still life, and a bunch of
in the last few hours. These statues are farther along. Like the statue in Found Footage 3 that was sunken into the floor was like the top part of the head. And it seemed like the statue was on its side, you know, at an angle. And only like barely a little below the wrist, and then the hand was outside the floor, and then most of the head. But like, this is most of the head, and then a lot of the back, and then some of the side of the arm, like
sunken bodies in the floor that look like they're made out of.
And then this thing is like reacting to the light. It's like, don't hit me. Don't put that in my eyes. It's so weird.
Floor. You see which is actually the tiled ceiling. But if we look at the frame before the camera moves, the ground is covered in piles of clothes and what looks like blood. I don't know how intelligent the still lives or the life forms are, but if they're intelligent enough to have a disposal area, then this looks like a waste zone. Bodies are converted by bacteria into life forms, and then the clothes they don't need are piled up here. That or a ton of people got torn apart right here. Given that the room's on its side, there could be some super elaborate scenario where there was a null zone in the midst of like a giant party or a conference somewhere with a ton of people in one room, and everyone fell through the null zone at once and then like all crashed into the floor of this room, so the bacteria just had a feeding frenzy and made like 100 life forms. I don't know, but it looks like something bad went down here. We see rooms where it looks like the same chair is being copied over and over. We also see a room that has what appears to be pirate ship steering wheels on the wall. And this could track back to my theory about people being in the complex and the complex beginning to steal what they know. Similar to Ravi's drum set, perhaps it would steal the pirate steering wheel that's in Clark's mind, you know, because of the Kevin Clark furniture store thing. I should also mention that the 8-pronged wheel is again symbolic of perhaps the prototype. Not sure if that's what they're going with here, but it's Kane, so you never know. One important thing to take note of is when Dr. Klein comes to find Clark in the furniture store, we see a picture of a bright beach behind her. That'll matter in a moment.
Yeah, that.
Now, there's a couple seconds in the trailer that gives us a ton of information. Walking through the complex, Clark finds a security camera. When he goes to the camera, we see the perspective of whoever's monitoring the camera. So this camera isn't a piece of the complex, this is something set up most likely by Async. And we get a few things here. Most importantly, the date at the top of the screen. Like I talked about in the timeline, this confirms that at least part of the movie takes place on June 29th, 1990, placing it a month after the events of Static Dead End, which again, right near the end of the Async timeline, perfect setting for a story. But what I also want to mention is the thing in the doorway behind Clark. We see a white silhouette with something black in the middle. Well, if we go back to earlier in the trailer when Clark's walking down the really long hallway towards the caveman, if we look at the caveman statue, we can see it's just to the right of a doorway. I believe the shot of the camera is after Clark walks in that door. So the white thing we see through the doorway through the security camera is the backside of the caveman cutout. But if you'll remember the caveman cutout we saw in Found Footage 3, there was nothing behind it. It was just cardboard. But now something is, and it seems that there's a wire ran to it as well. I believe what we're seeing is a speaker. Remember how in Found Footage 3 there were speakers playing weird noises throughout the complex, and I theorized that Async was doing that to lure the life forms? I think we're seeing the early stages of that here. Because when Clark was in that long hallway, walking towards the standee, we hear this.
Hello?
Yeah, that audio is from the Voyager 2 Golden Disc. That's Kurdish. They're saying, we the people of Earth welcome you, or something.
The audio we're hearing is the Voyager's golden record. So, in 1977, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, two spacecraft, were launched into space.
Actually, I just had an idea. What if the complex begins mimicking what Async was doing? Async was trying to attract the bacteria life form's attention using, you know, cardboard cutouts of people and music or, you know, audio recordings to attract them. What if that was what Async was doing, and the backrooms of the complex said, "Hold my non-existent beer," and then started copying this shit everywhere, which is why we see a random caveman cardboard cutout in a yellow section of wall just sort of there. And that we see speakers and the sound system elsewhere, just seemingly disconnected. But if you think about it, proximity-wise, they're only a few floors apart. Yeah, it's mimicking what the people inside
Each of them was a vinyl called the Golden Record. The Golden Record was placed there like a message in a bottle. If any extraterrestrial race found the record, they could play it to understand Earth. It's a novel idea, and the things we put on there are pretty heartwarming. It contains greetings in 55 different languages, which is what Clark hears when he sees the cutout, as well as musical selections from many cultures and sounds of things like footsteps and laughter. So it makes so much sense that when Async started to put these audio recordings out in the complex, that's what they would use. I mean, the complex is the ocean, it's the sea, right? It's space, it's our final frontier. And if there's life forms out there, then we'll try to greet them as kindly as we would want to greet anything else. I mean, from what we've seen in the series, that doesn't go so well, but hey, it's the thought that counts. After that, we see a shot of a few Async researchers. It seems one of them is pulling another one off of something. The one who's being pulled off seems to be holding a fire extinguisher, but pay attention to what's on the wall behind them. We see a stretched image of the same image that was in Clark's store. Similar to the room with the wheelbarrow that we saw in informational video, Complex is taking images of things that exist outside of its null zones and stretching them as if it's trying to put up an illusion. But of course, the illusion is distorted from the actual picture. There's a very quick shot we get of Clark going up to the old null zone or the old doorway and not being able to get in. I theorized earlier that perhaps if someone could go out the same null zone they came in, they could get back to where they were in reality, but I don't think these null zones are an exact science. You can probably get locked out, which might be what's happening to Clark here. There's one shot we see on the found footage cam that is an exact setup of the classic Backrooms image, like the OG one from way back on 4chan. And I just thought that was pretty cool. We see one shot of the classic.
Now, I will say, regarding...
Go out the same null zone they came in, they could get back to the doorway.
Yeah, I will say, regarding Clark, I think this is a red herring. I don't think this is at all what ended up Like, they're framing it in the sense of, oh my god, he can't get back now. Oh no, the null zone closed. I think this is just Clark fell through, saw how freaky everything was, and then wanted to turn tail and run, but doesn't know where to go yet. This is probably his first time into the complex, and he just doesn't know why part of the wall is stable and solid, but another part lets him pass through it. He's probably just freaked out in this moment given the nature of what he's discovered. This isn't, he might think he might be trapped here, but I have a feeling, because he says later, I've been coming and going, for the past several nights, I've been mapping this place out. I have a feeling this is the very first time he's ended up back here. And this is not a, oh shit, the walls are closing in on me kind of moment. This is a, oh no, I just fell through, because remember, he touches, in the trailer here, he touches the wall after he notices the light crack in his own basement. After he notices this shit, and he's like, okay, come on, load. There we go. And so he sees this, and he's like,
place.
oh? And so he puts his weight on it, right? He leans into the wall and puts his weight on it, and he tumbles forward through the null zone, lands on his feet, catches himself, and he's like, what the fuck? And does not know what to make of any of this. Because, yeah, if you tumble forward and you look up and you see this, like, of course he's going to be freaked out. And then fast forward to this moment right here. So this is like he's gone down around the corner and is in this camera room area now. And he's like, what the fuck am I watching? What is happening? Ignore the async people for a sec. Whoops. Okay, and so then he's like, oh, I gotta get out of here, and he's trying to go back because he walked away, and now he's returned, so he doesn't know exactly what section of wall it was that he passed through. Because again, 80% of this wall, or no, not even 80, 95% of this wall is totally impassable, save for this small slice of passable section. That's the problem. Or that's the scenario. So I think this is a red herring. I don't think he's trapped at this point. I think he's just begun to piece together what it is that he's gotten himself into.
And not being able to get in. I theorized earlier that perhaps if someone could go out the same null zone they came in, they could get back to where they were in reality, but I don't think these null zones are an exact science. You can probably get locked out, which might be what's happening to Clark here. There's one shot we see on the found footage cam that is an exact setup of the classic Backrooms image, like the OG one from way back on 4chan. And I just thought that was pretty cool. We see one shot of Dr. Klein in Clark's basement. We can see to the left on a whiteboard, Clark's just like me for real. We can see on the whiteboard that Clark and supposedly the rest of his team are mapping out the complex. We also see that, similar to Async, he's used blue tape to denote this anomaly that he can pass through. And then, would you look to the right of Dr. Klein here? What do we see hanging from the ceiling?
Wind chimes.
5 wind chimes. Now, I'm not alluding to and don't think that this means Beck is secretly involved with Clark somehow or anything like that, but Kane knows what the wind chimes mean, and I know what the wind chimes mean, and when I see that, I feel like he's winking at me through time. I don't like it. We get a quick shot of a really narrow hallway, followed by Dr. Klein, covered in blood, pushing her way through it. On the floor of the hallway, we see a cord lying on the ground. And on the wall across from the camera, we see what looks like a blue sky. If we look at the scene of the async researchers, we can see that a similar cord is lying on the ground around them, as well as the picture with the blue sky. So perhaps these scenes take place in the same room, or the one that Dr. Klein is pushing towards is another fake sky, or just a blue wall, and maybe async has these cords all over the complex. I don't know. But after that, we get one final image. A room that seems to be a pool or pool-like area within the complex, and then Clark standing on the other end, listening to the wall. It's very ominous, and who knows what this could be. Maybe Clark loses his mind, maybe this is a still life that looks like Clark. I've got no clue, but what I do have a clue about is that I'm excited. There's so many things we see just in a little bit that we give us that tie into the main series. Like I said, Kane has confirmed that this movie will exist as its own standalone film, but will also tie into the whole series. It won't break the continuity, it will just add to it. Again, I wouldn't go into this expecting a resolution that ties up all the loose ends to the async storyline. It looks like it's going to be more in line with the found footage tapes we get. It's going to be more personable about someone who finds their way in and stumbles across all the things that async has done. And there are so many cool things you can do with that narrative, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And if we can just take a step back, is this not incredible? We have been watching this series for years, theorizing about plot points and characters and dynamics and how the science works, and now it's shaping up to be the biggest horror film of the year, one of A24's biggest films of all time. It's such an incredible opportunity to see something that we've loved for so long come this far. And I know there's a lot of people who get annoyed by their interest becoming more mainstream or more people putting eyes on the thing they're into, and I know that, you know, some people, not naming any names, may have potentially, with a few different pieces of media proliferated that a little bit. But what this means is more success and more resources for Kane. I've said it from the first time I talked about the guy. Kane was meant to be a storyteller, and now he gets to tell them so well. I mean, you think this guy's going to quit at the Backrooms? There's no telling how many films this guy's going to come up with. The series is to the rooftops, and we got to be there when it was on the ground floor. This is such a fascinating thing to see. I can't wait to support the movie and see it like 4 or 5 times while it's in theaters, and hopefully you're excited to check it out as well. Again, May 29th. But something I really want to emphasize is why Kane's series has been so effective. I mean, there's a ton of YouTube horror series that are really good, and some of them great, but they don't get to the heights like this series has. And a lot of it, sure, was the idea and the technical prowess. The Backrooms had floated around online forever, and a ton of different creators took their shot at telling a story within the setting. So it was inevitable that someone would come along who had the technical skill to match the setting and make it into something big. But that's just why Found Footage 1 was so successful. That doesn't explain the continued millions of views and tens of millions of views across over a dozen videos. And I think a large part of it is Kane's commitment to the delivery.
And then the floral pattern is the one that I used throughout the entirety of the first short, and which is really just like a pilot at this point, or like a little tech demo. It was really fun at the time. But
that is kind of funny to think of it as a pilot.
I feel like, yeah, I feel like I have insecurity about it where I have to say that each time, just because it was like I made it for fun to like decompress. And like it was definitely like that's not the like I really enjoyed working on it. It was some of the most fun I've had on the thing because it was like
you're not evaluating.
It was the start. It wasn't like it was just like I was doing the Attack on Titan videos for a while. And it's just like okay, I'm gonna do this different thing, and it'll just be the thing, and it can be whatever I want it to be. And then of course I realized I had to make life difficult for myself and attach it to this other much bigger thing. And then every little choice had to be like scrutinized and kind of gain psychosis.
And now we're standing in.
Yeah, and but it resulted in this, and so I feel pretty good about it.
Feel pretty good about the Attack on Titan spinoff you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I spent like, I don't know what it'll cut down to, at least half an hour talking about a character who we have never seen, but has only been mentioned by name, giving his entire lore, background, events that happened to him, how he may be the catalyst for the story, through an unofficial soundtrack that the name of it just relates to the name of the company from the main series on a different channel. And again, it's a soundtrack. It's not even visuals or its own like moving narrative. It's just pictures and sounds and titles. But you can tell from a setup that the message was so precise that the delivery can be whatever it wants to be as long as it keeps its thesis in mind. Kane does it in such a dedicated way that you can learn so much from things that would otherwise be so tangential. I mean, look at some of the stuff they're doing with marketing this film. So A24 started airing this commercial. It's an ad for Captain Clark's furniture store, with Chiwetel in character as Clark advertising the Ottoman Empire. For one, I really appreciate the faith A24 has in the product to do stuff like this. I mean, they paid money to run an entire advertisement that says nothing about the movie. It's expecting that the audience will see it, be interested in why they got seemingly a 90s local TV ad for a furniture store, and then look from there, finding the film. I mean, if you didn't know, there isn't even anything that indicates this is a movie or the Backrooms other than the little A24 logo in the bottom right. But if you'll notice, at the top of the screen while Clark is talking, a phone number flashes. And if you call it,
it's a fax line.
A lot of you may not know what that is.
Yeah.
That means it's a fax number. In other words, you're not supposed to call this number with your phone. You're supposed to put it through a fax machine, as the logo next to it indicates. When you do, you get a printed out advertisement. Who uses fax machines anymore? There's some funny on-the-nose wording like, get lost in an endless sea of quality tables, chairs, lamps, couches, and bedroom sets. Get it sea, like the complex is the sea, and getting lost in all the furniture, like again, the complex. But if you'll notice, on the top left-hand corner of the page, there's a date. This date is for May 17th, 1990. And that date has shown up in one other place. Can't remember? Well, if you guess that's the date that Peter Tinch wrote on the wall while he was being held by Async in the complex before his escape, then you'd be right. But you'd also be insane, because why on earth would he have written that? What does that even mean? Why is that on the same date? I guess it could be a coincidence that it's on the same date, but I don't think Kane knows what those are. So, I don't know. I have no idea what to do with that. Yeah, the date Peter Tinch wrote on the wall, we should have known that it would be on the fax number for a furniture store. But it seems that teaching us to fax was leading us to the next step with the ARG. Because A24 also released merch that is a t-shirt for Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, of which I bought 4 of immediately. Which there's a couple things when we look at the back of the shirt. For one, we again see the pirate ship wheel imagery, which is a weird placement for it for graphic design. You would think it would be attached to a ship or something, but it just sitting there makes me think even more of the prototype, you know, the 8-pronged wheel imagery. But also something else to point out is Captain Clark's sword weirdly has 2 blades. Like there's only one hilt, but it looks like 2 swords split off from each other. Perhaps this is a bit of symbolism of the complex copying things the way they exist in reality, but a little bit different. Like, why would you need a sword with 2 blades? This isn't me saying the sword ties into the ARG or anything, I just think it's symbolic of the complex. But on the t-shirt, we get another fax phone number. This one prints out a piece of paper that says, join the South Bay Bulletin Board. On the early internet, you could sign up for these bulletin boards where you enter your email address, and if there's updates or sales, they would send them to you. You know, back before spam mail, people considered it nice to be told when they could buy things instead of flooded with it constantly all the time forever. And here we see another phone number, and this one we do call.
You have reached the South Bay Bulletin Board Archive. This number's been out of service since 1991. For access to the archived South Bay Bulletin Board, visit 408bbsarchive.net.
That address takes us to a website. Here we see an old bulletin board system, and when we hit enter, this is dial-up internet. Again, most of you don't know what that is. The average age of my audience is probably like 12. It allows you to enter your email and phone number so that you can stay up to date, which of course I did, and my editor is going to be nice and not show those things on screen. So assumedly, whatever the next step of this ARG is, it'll be sent straight to my phone or email, and that's awesome. But not only that, if you look at the fax paper that we got the number from in the first place, for one in the top left, we can see that this is on May 18th of 1990, so one day after the last fax. But look at the image itself. Around the South Bay bulletin board, it's the sun. And beneath it, across the bottom of the page, we have a ship on the ocean. This is... Oh my gosh,
and the wind was right. You could
do
sail
cool
anyway.
things with the opportunity they're given. This is great. Because to anyone else, this would be completely normal, right? Like, yeah, it's the South Bay of California. They're going to have bays and suns and oceans. But we know from watching the series that there's so much more in this. We're getting those same symbols that have been important then, proven to be important now. The series has never lost itself. It's just became more of what it always needed to be. And seeing Kane have the resources to do things like this is incredible. Normally, when something I like gets adapted or goes mainstream, I always have the fear in the back of my head that maybe it'll lose some of what made me love it so much, or there won't be as much dedication to the presentation of it. But I never had that concern with Kane, because every step of the way, he has put this much heart into everything. I mean, who takes the time to add the sun and the sea to a fax paper that is like step 3 out of who knows how many in this ARG? It's that kind of dedication that gets me so excited for the series moving forward and so excited for the movie. And to go back to the question I originally posed, why did Kane's Backrooms surpass the rest? I think it's because of the conflict and the soul at the heart of the story. Kane's Backrooms isn't the first series to deal with concepts of things like man becoming too arrogant in their drive for science or the future. I mean, we got most of those themes in Jurassic Park. It's also not the first series to deal with things like non-Euclidean geometry or weird impossible spaces. Things like the cosmic horror of the complex itself have been adapted in a ton of different ways. But it's because there's such a consistency in the tone behind what Kane says that no matter how it comes out, it feels coherent. It feels like a part of the whole. The piece of media that I hear get compared to Backrooms most often would have to be Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves, which I'm sure I'll inevitably make a video about that book and ruin the online discourse around it for about a year. But the story at the core of House of Leaves is something called the Navidson Record. I mean, technically, the story of House of Leaves is a publishing company who was sent writings by a guy named Johnny, who found other writings from a blind guy named Zampano, who wrote about the Navidson Record, which was a documentary film thing that doesn't actually exist. But Navidson Record. Will Navidson wakes up one day to discover that there's a new room in his house, and when he measures the distance through it, the measurement on the inside of the house is a 1/4 inch bigger than the outside of the house. Of course, this would be impossible. If it was the other way around, you could say maybe they're not accounting for, you know, the insulation or the material of the house itself, but there's no way it could be bigger on the inside. This discrepancy drives Will crazy until new rooms begin to appear. Eventually, a door appears in his living room that leads to a labyrinth. A labyrinth of looping hallways and rooms that all look the same but couldn't have been designed by human hands. The space is impossibly large, and whoever built it didn't seem to care for the people who would one day venture in. House of Leaves was published in 2000, and if you think this sounds a lot like the Backrooms, that's because it is. House of Leaves was a huge hit, and a ton of people took ideas from the story, things like the impossible staircases, and the forever hallways, and the labyrinth created under someone's house, and that made its way into a lot of different stories before the yellow wallpaper Backrooms became so popular online, to where a lot of people found that as their first introduction to the concept. And sure, those ideas are cool, and you can do a lot of cool things with them, but what makes House of Leaves stand out is the conflict that Will Navidson has with himself throughout the story. I mean, there's a lot of things that makes House of Leaves stand out, like the way the story is written for one, but there was a soul at the back of everything Will did that made it feel so much more engaging. Will used to be a war photographer. He used to place himself in the most dangerous spots in the world so that he could get the perfect shot, make the perfect discovery. And now there's a cosmic labyrinth within his own home. So of course he wants to dive into it. At every point the danger is surmountable, at every point it seems it shouldn't be worth it, you understand why Will has to keep pushing forward. Because if nothing else, then because it's there. How could we as people see a frontier so strange, so undiscovered, and not step into it ourselves? I mean, it's what we've been doing for as long as we've been around. I mean, it's the sea, right? And what kind of person hangs around the sea long enough and doesn't think about becoming a sailor? Which it's not lost on me that Clark's character is a pirate in his furniture store ads. A sailor who ventures into the sea to take and conquest. Perhaps that may relate to his
lobby sure do got a lot of
also,
lobby
his name
in
is
it.
Clark, like Lewis and
I
Clark.
agree.
He's named after one of the most famous explorers in
The
United
lobby's
States
made
history.
out of
It's
lobby.
things like that. It's notes of the theme that underline everything that make it feel so consistent. But the struggle of Will Navidson in House of Leaves is one of the things that stuck out the most to me when reading the book, and it's something that reminds me of Async every time I think of it. Now, Kane has never read House of Leaves. Me and his dad keep trying to make him read House of Leaves, but I think that's all the more telling, that both Danielewski and Kane Parsons stood before this figurative sea and thought of explorers. How could someone stand on the shore and not want to step in? Every time I talk to Kane about the series, he emphasizes that he doesn't see Async as evil, just misguided. Sure, some members of Async may be doing evil for the greater good, but as the company itself, as the researchers, who would they not be to want to explore the great unknown? What kind of astronaut doesn't want to go to space? And it's in that righteous desire that they find their folly. The drive of what's good allows the monster, the real villain, to come out. If you'll remember, way back in the Backrooms series, in the unlisted video that showed a car, no clipping, into the Backrooms that we then see hit the wall in found footage 2, that video's title was a long string of numbers. Well, this string of numbers is the ISBN code to the yellow wallpaper. The Yellow Wallpaper was a short story written by Charlotte Gilman in 1892. Charlotte Gilman wrote The Yellow Wallpaper based on her own experience with postpartum depression, or temporary nervous depression as it was known at the time. The story The Yellow Wallpaper is from the perspective of the woman who's just given birth, and has now been prescribed rest cure until she feels better. She talks about how all of this is perfectly normal, how it's totally understandable that her husband would do things like lock her in a room and not allow her to come out for several days as she slowly loses her mind. Through The Yellow Wallpaper, she continues to talk about how sickly the walls look around her, how the yellow pattern causes her to feel ill, until eventually she becomes convinced that there is a woman on the other side of the yellow wallpaper trying to get out. So one day she tears down the wallpaper and begins crawling around on the ground like she saw the woman do within the wallpaper itself, now believing herself to be that freed woman. At the end of the story, the husband comes into the room, sees what she's doing, and faints, to which, as she crawls around the room on all fours, she simply crawls over him. Now, this story's been talked about for a long time, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. The most common critique you'll hear is a feminist critique. Obviously, the greatest theme is about the position of women in the 19th century, and the intense expectations that were given to them, and how a lot of the time their prescriptions made things worse. Oh, this woman has postpartum depression, we should lock her in a room for weeks. That'll fix it. As we can see from the outside looking in, the prescription wasn't for her betterment, it was to save the embarrassment of her husband. In this critique, the woman seen through the wallpaper at the end of the story is a triumph. It's a more free, powerful version of herself that makes her rip the wallpaper that has made her feel ill off of the walls, and then quite literally step over the husband that did this to her. However, I think it's for a different reason that Kane made the code for this story the title of one of his unlisted videos. Obviously, of course, there's the yellow wallpaper. You could imagine the wallpaper from the story being the wallpaper of the complex. But of course, there's the note that it's within the wallpaper she sees a monstrous woman who by the end of the story turns out to be herself. And in her desire to free this woman, that allows the woman to come out, to become her. This feels so much to me like a representation of Ivan Beck. Someone so determined to step into the other side, to take what he feels was taken from him, not realizing that inevitably the complex might as well be nature, and man can never fully tame nature. At its core, that seems to be the central conflict of the story to me. The complex is just the next great frontier, and Async are the adventurers who are seeking to map it. It's so interesting to me because I feel like a story with these same tones could have been told in the 1400s, before the oceans were charted, when sailors feared they would fall off the map or fall prey to monsters. And then in the early days of the space race, what would we find when we ventured out into the cosmos? But inevitably, we filled in the maps now. So the Backrooms asks the question, what if there's more map? What if there was a next great frontier? What could we do other than charge in? It's man versus nature, but with characters in mind like Ivan Beck, it becomes a story of man versus self. What did he lose that was so important? Is it worth the destruction of himself and potentially the rest of the world? What does identity and knowledge and purpose mean to one man when it can't possibly be worth the potential cost? How can the white whale be worth it if the whale is truly that dangerous?
Okay, I think it's recovering. Yeesh. Suddenly it dropped off a cliff again. I think we're all right, though. Okay. Back to where we were.
Then again, what's Captain Ahab to
do? Sorry
to
about
get
that.
off the ship? It's a tale as old as time about man's hubris, about exploring new horizons, about sailing over the sea. It's just using the setting of a creepy picture that floated around the internet. And asks, what if the next great unknown is all the...
Okay, come on. Internet, please, will you just fucking iron out for the last 5 minutes? Ugh. I'm genuinely not certain that it's gonna cooperate to let me get these last few bits out. Well, wait, never mind. It might iron itself out. We'll see. See if it'll let it go.
Horror of the complex is again something that's so intrinsic to people. We all have a fear of forgetting, if that be the fear of forgetting loved ones or the fear of losing our memory as we get older. When discussing the Backrooms, I see a lot of people bring up The Caretakers everywhere at the end of time, a 6-hour art piece that mimics the stages of dementia through music. One of my earliest videos on the channel was me listening through the whole thing, and safe to say, it's a powerful experience. One of the most remembered images from everywhere at the end of time is the final stage, which is presented by a picture turned around. All that can be seen is the blue tape on its back. Now, I'm not sure if Kane began using blue tape so much in his series because of that visual, but nevertheless, both pieces are harkening back to the same idea. What if we're forgotten? What if our existence is just a small drop in a big ocean? I mean, the complex is a space that is actively forgetting us. It takes all of our memories, all of these cherished ideas we have of home and places and people we love, and makes it these bastardized versions, these vague representations of some of the pieces placed here and other things placed over there, and maybe some big picture items, but otherwise blank and empty. It's as if you're watching something's mind deteriorate in real time, but the thing that it's forgetting is us. Carl Jung theorized about something called the collective subconscious. Basically, the idea that there is this invisible collective of human experiences that people draw on when they're born. Basically, the idea of a collective group of thoughts or ideas that humanity pulls from. Things that are simply understood, things that seem passed down to us. Well, in the Backrooms, it's as if that subconscious is a place. And what if we peek behind the curtain and we see where our memories go, only to find they don't matter? They're being erased away as we watch. It's an overwhelming cosmic dread that can be filled in so much of the series. What if our last great frontier is the frontier that doesn't remember us at all? In that sense, it's almost like Async is warring against God. The complex is something beyond humanity. It uses our thoughts and our visages as a sandcastle. So by mapping it, by exploring it, are we staking a flag in something so that it won't take our flags from us? Or is it just a death rattle, a final attempt for humanity to take back something we can never hope to conquer? Would it be better to lie down and let oblivion happen, or to sail into it, try to make a difference? Kane's Backrooms is the one that has stuck around, the one that has made it to this level of success because it asks those questions and it asks them so well. There's never a moment of preachiness, there's never a time where characters sit down and all of this is explained in high concept things you'd hear in an overrated YouTube video. It simply takes characters, puts them in the setting, and lets humanity speak for itself. And I think it's those kind of stories that are the most impactful, the ones that simply show us what it's thinking rather than telling us. It's such powerful ideas and such a terrifying structure, and Kane is really getting all it's worth. I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. I can't wait to watch the movie, because at the root of it all, I know no matter how scary the creatures we see are, how much we can theorize about green lights and characters and missing eyes, there's going to be a story at the base of it that matters, something that says something. And it's not something you find every day, but I'm glad we found it this time. There's few things more rewarding than seeing someone doing the thing you know they're supposed to be doing. When it comes to Kane, I can't imagine him doing anything else. This series, the presentation, the deliveries, the theories, the scares are all fantastic. And despite everything, I think this guy's still on the ground floor. Kane, I couldn't be more proud of you, and this couldn't have happened to someone more deserving. Thank you for telling your stories, and thank you for letting me watch. And also comb your hair, or put on deodorant, or something. I hope you're as excited to check out the movie as I am. Again, it's coming out next month, May 29th. And as I mentioned, after it comes out, and after it's been out probably like a month, I'm going to make another video analyzing the film, so we can see how many things I got right and how many things I inevitably got wrong. But regardless of that, for now, I'm just happy you stuck around this long, and I just want to say thank you for watching. It's really cool to see a series that has meant this much to me come this far, and I'm glad we get to watch it together. I said it earlier, but thank you all so much for the support that you showed on the original Backrooms video. Obviously, I didn't have anything to do with Kane's success. He was already huge by the time I found him, and he certainly didn't need my help. But regardless, it is cool that making that first video put me in a position where I could reach out to him, and now I not only know a cool film director, but I know a cool friend. You all continue to throw me into blessings that I can't thank you enough for, but sincerely, thank you for everything you've given me. Of course, if you somehow still haven't seen Kane's series, I'll have it linked in the description, as well as the Not KanePixel's channel. Be sure to check all this stuff out. I can talk about it all I want, but nothing beats watching it for yourself. Stay tuned for more videos here. Videos every week, Mondays at noon over on Wind Gang, and also if you want to watch the editor bully me while I play video games, you can check out Wind Glitch. Really appreciate the support, and you all mean the world. But I believe that should do it for now. Before I go, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. But actually, you know what? I gassed Kane up way too much there at the end of the video, so I need to bring him down a little bit. So let's all remember what the first video uploaded to his channel is.
Did he like cut out the audio because of, I don't know, whatever. Is that Kane there, or is that?
No, I don't care that he was like 12 when he made it. I'm a YouTuber. Bullying kids is like half my job.
Good. Bully them children. Them children's understand the pecking order. That's what they got to do. They got to understand the pecking order. Okay. Well, I guess.
Hello, guys.
I guess that's it. There's not much else to say really. That shit was cool. Damn. So yeah, 4 weeks, Backrooms movie. It's going to be great. Hopefully you're more or less caught up to what we all have kind of arrived at collectively as a fandom. Here's hoping that we're not super far off the mark on a lot of our conjecture and guesses. I don't know. There are some things that I'm not 100% on that I have yet to see convincing evidence one way or the other. Ivan Beck being the sole nucleation site for the complex. I can maybe buy that, maybe not. I don't know. Only time will tell. Kane has said it will take like 15 years for him to tell the whole story. I look forward to that. Hopefully it'll be a fun 15 years. So yeah, I will catch you all Monday for Minecraft. And this time it will actually be Minecraft, because this thing was kind of like an odd one-off exception. You know how it is. So yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe. Goodbye.